Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 112 of Hash Church. It's been another great week, and I am going to send out the links here so we can get this show on the road. Let's hope I haven't forgotten anybody here. We do with the Facebook, and we do the Hash Church email on the road. Let's hope I haven't forgotten. Bubble Man. Here. There we go. And we will send out the link through Skype, always sending it out through a million different ways. So make sure it gets seen by everyone. I hope everyone's doing really good today. Another beautiful day in paradise. Geared up for Jamaica next month. Pretty excited about that, not going to lie. Let me find this box so I can actually see who's in the room. I bet you it's Etienne. And it isn't. It's Chimera, Skunkman Sam, Johnny B, and Todd. I have to admit, that was kind of surprising to come back from the page and see you guys and not Etienne.
I'll be playing with Etienne. Great morning.
The echo.
Yeah, I'll just wear my headphones because people don't know how to keep their mics muted. It's easier for me to keep my headphones on. I think that should have been what I did right away. So I will do that. You guys feel free to talk. Hello, Etienne. The floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing this fine, wonderful day?
Yeah, echo, because you don't have your mic muted. If you leave it unmuted, we get the echo. There we go. And there we go. Headphones. Has my echo left?
Your echo is gone, and I would like to congratulate America on some legalizations across the United States, as well as some medical marijuana, and then we gave the world a clusterfuck in Donald Trump.
Hey, you know, the funny thing is the few random things I've heard about the guy, not that I want to start talking about Donald Trump a bunch this morning, but the few little things that I saw, people were surprised, so maybe we'll be surprised. In the meantime, awesome news, America. Holy smokes, 8 out of 9. States, as Todd educated me on a few days ago there. That's it's wonderful. I mean, that's a step in the right direction, if you ask me.
It's quite a sweep. I mean, if you really look at, everybody was concentrating on California, and we were wondering, Arizona was on the fence, but it looks like it's going to lose in the end. They're supposedly still counting, but when we look at the actual precincts, it still looks like it's all done, but who knows? We are very proud to see Nevada go the direction. We're definitely to see the breakthrough in Massachusetts and Maine on the East Coast. Maine barely won, but made a difference. Hell, even out here in California, Mendo, Trinity, and Humboldt all voted for it this time around. In fact, we were looking the other day, Todd and I, and Trinity literally won by 1 vote.
Wow.
Yeah, huge thank you to that one person in Trinity County.
Dr. Natasha?
What's that, Indra?
I wanted to ask Dr. Natasha a question, if I could.
Well, let's first say welcome, Dr. Natasha.
Good morning, Dr. Natasha.
Use your words, Indra.
Good morning.
Say, about a year ago, I started using this spray on my microbiome, and it basically bacteria that remove the ammonia-eating bacteria off your body. And a lot of things happened in that year to me. All my skin over my whole body changed. And so many other things changed. I got better. My elimination process changed. My wife started telling me that I smelled really good, and after hearing her for years go, you need a shower, it was a great switch. But anyway, those bacteria have made such a qualitative effect on my body. I'm just wondering if you could speak to that, because it's something that I feel moved about, because I mean, the wrinkles in my face went away. I was having crust in my eyes in the morning when I woke up. That all went away. And just by spraying this other bacteria on my skin every 3 or 4 days.
What bacteria was it?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's it's Dirt is the site I think you can go to and find it, and they sell it, and you put it on 2-3 times a week, and the guy who invented it hasn't taken a shower in 13 years. And,
is it a spray or is it a
Jesus.
lotion that you rub on your
No,
skin,
it's a
or
spray. It's a spray.
certain parts of the skin, or the entire
Hang on,
epidermis?
I'll grab the bottle. You spray it in your armpits and and the other end of your body.
I like showers.
Yeah, I'm with Mark. I'm gonna stick with showering.
Well, what's interesting about what Indra's talking about, and I don't know the specific spray that you're talking about, but I've heard about these probiotic sprays, and I should bring one of my friends, Shauna, on. She's an amazing bacteria expert and could explain to us all the mechanism of what was happening. But in general, what these sprays are doing is they're shifting the commensal bacteria in your skin and in your body. So those are the regular healthy bacteria that are part of you. And this, I mean, we could do a whole episode just talking about this, but what's really interesting is people, when they're born, they have something that they actually call a poo print. So kind of like your fingerprint. It's like your beneficial and bad bacteria that kind of make up a part of you. And a big thing that influences this is how you're born. So if a baby is born vaginally or through C-section, this changes the type of bacteria that naturally is around you. And also a big thing that determines your early poo print is if you're breastfed or bottle fed. And then of course, as your food is introduced, all these things, how your general cleanliness of, if you're too clean, you over bleaching everything, that can have a detrimental effect on your healthy bacteria. And so when people are taking these probiotic pills and now these new sprays, what that's doing is kind of shifting how your natural microflora is on your body. And what's interesting, Indra, what you're saying about even how the way you smell changed, that's a big thing. So like what causes odor in your armpits and such is actually bacteria feeding on nutrients and things that are coming out in your perspiration or sweat. And so when you shift the bacteria that lives on you, even when you're sweating out these little nutrients, the good bacteria can metabolize it in a way that doesn't smell bad. And so when these people are saying that they no longer need to shower, I mean, they're still probably showering just because, as you guys are saying, it feels nice just to have that water and rinsing action. But what these people can now do is they might not need to use soap in the same way, because every time you use soap on your skin, it's disrupting all your bacteria, but it's also very irritating on your skin. And so people who have sensitive skin who use soap every day, that can be really harsh on your skin. And so when people start using these probiotic kind of applications and even using, like some of the products I make are more designed to build up your skin barrier so you don't have that irritation. And so what these bacteria are doing is actually changing not only your bacteria population, but they're changing your skin barrier. They're changing the way your immune system responds. They're actually changing the nutrients that are being metabolized on your skin. So as Indra has experienced, this can have far-reaching effects on your body and even simple things like how you smell. So yeah, I want to know more about the brand and what type you're taking.
Let me tell you, it's Mother Dirt, and
Mother
it's called
Dirt.
AO Mist. And a lot of thoughts occurred to me. Like when a baby is born and breastfeeds the first time. I know they get the colostrum, but besides that, they get the mother's biome because they're interacting with the skin. And so that transfers and kind of fires up the baby's other systems, because there's a lot more to breastfeeding than just transferring colostrum and milk. There's a tremendous amount of energy going back and forth, and there's a lot of things happening that we haven't really looked into. But after having used this stuff for a year, it made such a qualitative effect. I had dry skin areas and other things, and I think a lot of other bacteria were probably munching on my hiney, and adding this stuff to the mix. And by the way, we take showers every day, no matter what, but we just don't use that bar of soap anymore. We get in, we rinse. They also make a hair thing that you can do. And you rinse, you take a good shower. I mean, I take a really good shower, and then I get out and spray myself again with this stuff, because it makes a difference. You know, I'm in line at the supermarket and I see people don't look at me and go, Jesus Christ, that's
Can I ask you, John? So are you using the AO mist? Is that which one you're using?
Yep.
Yep.
AO Mist. Never heard of it, but I do want to welcome Judy Booth to the room. Would you like to give her a little introduction there, Natasha?
Hi,
myself, I just met Judy the other day myself, and it seems as though I walked out of the room and you were gone, Judy.
Yeah, so I just met Judy. That when you met Judy, Marcus, that was my second time meeting Judy. So Judy and I had the pleasure of meeting a few days ago at UBC. I went to go do a talk. Judy can talk more about this, but someone from her lab was doing a talk on sandalwood and the terpenoids in the sandalwood tree, which was a really interesting topic. And one of my friends happened to know Judy. So Judy's doing her PhD at UBC and she's studying terpenoids in cannabis. And so I was very excited to connect with her and invited her to come on Hash Church. And honestly, we haven't even totally chatted about everything she's doing. Thought we'd save it for the show. So more about what you're doing.
Yeah,
and
sure.
welcome.
So I'm studying terpenes and cannabis, but mostly from the plant's perspective. You know, the lab I work in is a botany lab, and we work mostly on plant and how the plant makes these compounds. So
How long have you been working with terpenes?
about 2.5 years.
The lab that Judy works in is actually one of the most comprehensive terpene labs in the world. It's the PI is named Jorg Bollman, and he discovered a lot of the terpene synthases in pine trees and Douglas fir and all these different plants.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So tell us about your work with cannabis. What are you looking at for terpene synthases, or what's the scope of your project?
So I'm working on terpene synthesis from a genomic perspective in cannabis. So I'm trying to find all of the terpene synthases in different cannabis strains. I'm working with Purple Kush as a model right now and just trying to figure out which genes are making the different terpenes and how they work.
Are you doing all your work in silico, or is it in vivo?
It's mostly in vitro.
Okay.
So we're sort of cloning out the enzymes, the little molecular machines that make the terpenes, and testing them one at a time to see their terpene profile. And then we can map that back to the genome and see which genes in the genome are making the terpenes and when and where they're expressed.
So is that work you're doing in conjunction with John Page from Anandia then?
He's providing the resources for the project, yeah.
Okay.
So does that mean also that you're finding multiple versions of the synthases? For example, in skunk number 1, there's a CBD synthase, but it's non-functional.
Yeah, I actually haven't had the opportunity to work with cannabinoid synthases yet. Terpene syntheses
I mean, in the terpene syntheses, are you finding multiple versions or non-functional versions?
Yes, yeah, we're finding both. Multiple versions and non-functional versions. And we're also finding similar versions in different strains that are not exactly identical, but are similar to each other and make the same product. So we can compare across strains too.
Hmm.
So are you looking at plants that have been chemotyped, like that have had, or I heard that you were doing GC-MS for your analytical method. So are you doing that with different sources of flowers that have different terpene fingerprints?
So for now, I'm only working with Purple Kush because that's where we have the genomic data available.
Yeah.
And then from there, we can expand it out to other strains.
What type of homologies do you see across the plant kingdom in terpene synthesis? I mean, certainly cannabis isn't unique in that it makes terpenes. All plants make terpenes. So what type of homologies do you see across the plant kingdom?
The homologies are very high, especially to hops. Cannabis and hops are very closely related. Hops is in the beer flavoring compound. And we see similarities between cannabis and hops and also lots of other plants all the way down to conifers in terms of the structure of the terpene synthesis and also the products that they make.
I was wondering, are you guys growing the cannabis at UBC or are you purchasing the Purple Kush?
No, Anandia Labs has a license to cultivate under the narcotics control regulations at UBC.
Perfect.
So that's how they're getting their material.
Is it organically grown or is it
No,
being used with synthetics?
it's not organically grown.
Oh, we got it. Okay. Interesting. Just a couple curiosity questions.
Yeah, I was in India last week.
Oh yeah.
I got an interesting little setup going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, damn, invite me next time.
Yeah, I was actually
get a moment.
I was flying back from Amsterdam, and our flight came in late, and I ended up staying over the night. So.
Oh, nice.
I went and saw him the next day.
Cool. How big is the grow there? Is it a decent size, or is it just more?
No, it's small. It's just a little small research grow in one of the lab rooms on campus.
Judy, I wanted to ask a question. What got you into investigating terpenes in the first place?
I was really interested in it from a food flavor perspective originally, because terpenes are in so many different kinds of plants, right? As we already said. They're the flavors in a lot of spices, and they're behind a lot of wine aromas. So that's originally what I was interested in. But the opportunity to work on cannabis came up, and I jumped at that.
So you had already heard of cannabis.
I was familiar.
Right on.
Yeah. You've been working on it for quite some time, right? Skunkman Sam?
Yeah. Sam, you jumping in here?
Yes, I've been working on it a very long time. I've been intellectually thinking about terpenes as modulators and potentiators of the cannabinoids for 3 decades or longer. We actually started getting serious around 2000 when we got pure THC and were able to try it. And then we realized that it's incredibly flat and boring even when it's 100% THC. Whereas a resin, dry sifted resin that was only 50% THC was twice as strong subjectively. So
it brings me back to the conversation we had last week and how I was sort of talking about how I don't want to take my lesser material, i.e. the material I've already washed the resin off of, and then go and make sort of a plant fat extract out of that. And then it got to the point where isn't isolates all just the same? It's like, yeah, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about what Sam just mentioned right there, which is it's not about the percentage of the THC. It's about getting that full profile that produces not just a recreational enjoyment, but often sometimes a medical aspect that. Go ahead, disagree.
I disagree with one thing, and that is it does matter how much THC. When you smoke resin that's 50% resin heads, it can be quite pleasant, 40, 50% THC. But you smoke 100% resin heads, and it could be in the low 80s. And it's different.
I just meant that it's not necessary to have it be 100. It's very different from monomolecular medicine that we're extracting and isolating into the isolates like pure CBDA or pure THCA and then creating our own little mixes. Not quite the same as the complexities that cannabis brings us in these cannabinoid and terpene profiles. And so that's what I was trying to get at last week, just that there's something about why that connoisseur wants to get that best gland head isolated with perfect maturity. And I think that sometimes it'll translate over to the medical platform as well.
It helps if you have a perfect clone that you love in all terms, including yield, flavor, effects.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mark, could it have something to do with washing the gland heads also removes the terpenes? And so you want to squish up the gland heads themselves so that you get the terpenes that are inside. And if you had a method to separate the trichromes that didn't disturb the terpene profile at all, you might be a happier boy. I'm just suggesting that
well, that's why we love dry sift, John, because when we make full 99.9% dry sift, there is no loss of terpenes whatsoever. Now, on a sidebar, I have been found over the years when I first started making water hash, and I wasn't inspired by what I saw. It was very like what you just described. Hash that had its terpene profile eradicated, destroyed, decimated, and it was just not enjoyable. It also was always a bit wet. Nobody knew how to dry it. And it wasn't until the first time that I decided to run some of Breeder Steve's material, which was the shishka berry from the yellow line, I believe. And it was the first time I ever saw something come out of exceptional quality. And it really led me to start the Bubble Bag Company and realize and learn about how certain cultivars produce terpenes that do not wash out in water. They are as present at the end of the wash as they were at the start of the wash. So there's also those two aspects of bubble hash and dry sift have allowed me to be quite a happy boy. I'm not going to lie.
So when we get to Jamaica, I'm bringing along with me what I need in order to make what I call dry sift my way.
Well, are you coming next month?
Well, I'm 99.9% sure I am right now. I want to.
Awesome.
I want to in the worst way possible. I'm trying to get an appointment at my doctor to find out if it's okay if I fly.
Yep.
And if not, I'll have to take a boat or swim. But one way or the other, I planned on it. But anyway, I'll bring along the necessary materials to do that, and I hope to enlighten you and convert you.
It would be historical. Enlightenment is a guarantee. Conversion, we'll see. I'm down for anything.
I just want to see you try it and witness it, and then turn around and say to me,
wow,
hey, John, I love this.
Yeah.
And then I'll be a happy camper, because I think we can go forward with it. You know, there's a lot of things we can do with it. It's not just stuck on one thing.
So we're just discussing.
That was my torch. Sorry.
Torch.
What was that?
Natasha, you gave me this little balm stuff here the other day, and I just tried it, and I was going to ask you just how I can smell the terpenes in this and the essence of it, which is really amazing. It's kind of more uplifting. And you said smoke some hash with it right away, so I was smoking on some Moroccan hash here, and I kind of want to know a little bit more about this, because I'm feeling the relief of the tension in my neck in a period of the last like 3 or 4 minutes. It's just kind of easing up. So sorry for cutting off, but this is actually all about terpenes, and I want to kind of know more about it.
Awesome. I'm happy you liked it. I was wondering if it was gonna make it home with you when I gave it to you. You were in a very good mood. It was a fun birthday celebration. But anyway, yeah, so what's in there is I made that little blend just for you. So it actually doesn't have any cannabis in it, but how I've designed it is to target the endocannabinoid system and work complementary with cannabis. So if you use it after you've consumed cannabis, you'll find it works even better than if you're just using it without cannabis. So it works complementary. And so what I've done is I've put some copaiba balsam essential oil, and so that contains about 50% what is it called, beta caryophyllene, and so that can target the CB2 receptor similar to cannabidiol, so it has a nice anti-inflammatory effect. And then it's also a nice essential oil because it doesn't have that strong of aroma. It almost smells slightly like vanilla and a little bit like pencil. Very mild. So it contains that. And then what I've combined with it is then to get that minty flavor, it has peppermint, spearmint, eucalyptus, and lavender. And so I use those 4 different compounds because they all contain different terpenoids. So for instance, like peppermint has the menthol, spearmint, I can't remember what the compound's called, but it's different than menthol. Even though they smell pretty similar, they still have different anti-inflammatory effects. And then the eucalyptus has the eucalyptol, and then the lavender is high in linalool, and they also smell really pretty. And then another compound that I've recently started working with for pain relief is vetiver. So vetiver is amazing for perfume, and that was mostly what I was using it for because it's a really good base note. It has a very, like when you're making perfumes and aroma compounds for pleasure, a major issue when you're using all organic essential oils and such is that they don't have a long stay and they don't have what's called a sillage or throw. So for instance, when someone comes in with perfume and you can smell that after effect, it's hard to get that with a lot of essential oils. And so vetiver is really cool because it has such a strong aroma. And a lot of people, when you first smell it, you're almost turned off by it because it's so strong. But once it's diluted properly, it's so delicious. But anyway, I was just playing around with it and actually trying to experiment how it blended with clove, because clove has some really nice pain relieving properties. And anyway, I was just playing around with this vetiver clove blend and found that those two on their own had really good pain relieving effects. So I get inflammation and from just overusing my hand from typing all day. And so I started making little pain blends just for my hand. And I found that I just kept reaching toward this vetiver blend. And so there hasn't been a lot of research on vetiver for pain relieving effects, and it's high in these other kinds of sesquiterpenoids called vetiveroids and vetiverines. They've got all these fun names. But I'm wondering even how they would combine and interact with cannabinoids, because they seem to have their own whole anti-inflammatory, anti-pain effects. And another cool thing with these vetiver compounds is they're very good at calming people down. And there's some clinical trials where they've looked at it for concentration. So they've even, I put it in my blends because it's supposed to help, similar to peppermint. Like, you know, when you smell peppermint in the morning and it helps you focus and it helps you wake up. So vetiver has a similar type effect. And so anyway, I combine those all together. They work really nice, and it works really nice on your temples for headaches, along your back. And
I just put it on my neck. And like I said, it was uplifting. I put it on my neck. And because of the peppermint and the smells and those terpenes in it, along with smoking some beautiful Moroccan hash, it really works. So, you know, these are great things to talk about terpenes and how THC and terpenes work in conjunction for great pain relief. I would just kind of want to make mention, we're talking about terpenes, and as you're talking, I tried this and I can just feel the effects. It might be the good hash too. Both work great together, just saying. So
it's definitely
works together.
It's possible that together it's working very well, because I was smoking the hash this morning while I was in my room working, and I didn't get the same effects as what I got when I used this together. So just kind of my own little.
It was interesting vaporizing it the other day at the CCHQ when you guys had that a little bit of the oil. Was that a diluted version, Natasha?
Oh, so that was vetiver, but that was CO2 vetiver extract. So we got that from Devin, and so hopefully he'll be coming on the show at some point. And yeah, so that was a CO2 extract of vetiver, so it actually smelt way milder than normal vetiver. Judy, you got to smell that one also. And so yeah, you can actually smoke it. And so Devin's company, all kinds of different things. They're just getting into cannabis, but the stuff that they work on is mostly like vetiver and cinnamon, and they even gave me a sample of sarsaparilla, which is CO2 extract, which is amazing. And so anyway, he was here and we were trying to dab these like vetiver and the cinnamon. But what's really interesting is the CO2 extracts. Like when you're thinking of inhaling cinnamon, you're like, ooh, it's going to get really spicy. But the CO2 cinnamon extract is so lovely. It has like this little bit of a peak where it feels like it's about to get spicy, and your brain almost goes like, uh-oh. And then it just drops right down, and then is this beautiful floral spice, like where you have like your mouth full of delicious perfume. And so anyone who's tried the cinnamon has been like, this is amazing. Marcus, you tried the vetiver. You didn't get that strong of a one, but again, the exhale, it feels very like, you're almost like exhaling a rich cologne, like it's, but like in a good way.
It was nice. I mean, honestly, for me, it was reminiscent of being, having my gallery back in the day on Commercial Drive, the Melting Point, and having the inhalation station of vaporization set up, you know, 15 plus years ago. And having at least 20 different varieties of herbs that we had gone over next door to the Sweet Cherry Bum, which I was right next door to. And they had a wall like of 100 plus different dried herbs that you could go and smell. And so really we just went from the bioassay aspect. We didn't know anything about safety or dangers or any of that. We were just going from what our body said that was a really nice, pleasant feeling. And, oh, I won't do that again type of thing. And it was pretty incredible, I have to say, like, very ahead of its time, inspired a lot of different people to come and experience these essential oil modulations. We didn't even know that's what we were doing, but we knew that when we inhaled these terpenes through these different vaporizers, we had the Aromed and we had the Volcano and we had the a whole variety of them, like half a dozen to 10 different ones on the table, the Volatizer. And it was a pretty cool concept to, while of course we were, you know, using cannabis throughout the entire day, we were also vaporizing different types of herbs and plants. And there were some profound revelations to be had in that experience.
Natasha, are you sure it was cinnamon oil that you were testing? Because cinnamon has not been used for a long time. I extract it for Roberte for a number of years. And there's another plant that is very similar to cinnamon. It tastes similar. It's a fast-growing plant. That's what they've been using for about the last 10 years for cinnamon to put in food.
I'll check the bottle to verify, but I'm pretty sure it was cinnamon, but it might be a different variety of cinnamon. It might, because I know there's like different types of cinnamon, because it was nowhere near, like I work with cinnamon as a pain reliever in the essential oil form, like steam distilled, and I would never inhale that. I would not recommend inhaling that to anyone. Like it's, and even like cinnamon powder, like do not try inhaling that. That's very risky.
Yeah.
For some reason, this form of cinnamon, it was just the terpene concentrate, and but I'm pretty sure it was a cinnamon. I mean, I'll look in the bottle because it has.
I know they call
it wasn't, but anyway, it is. But
they called them both cinnamon. One is wild in Sri Lanka, the other is cultivated in South India. And they give both what they call cinnamon quills, but one of them's real cinnamon, the other one's not.
But it might not matter that much if the compounds involved are the same. The essential oil is going to be
No problem.
I'm
sure you'll be happy to buy the second grade. I'll take the first one.
That's true, but the cinnamon that they're calling cinnamon now that they extract from this very fast-growing plant that grows bark is more potent than regular cinnamon, and they use it at 0.25 less of concentration in foods.
So this form is cinnamon zayanicum. Have you heard of that form?
Yeah, there's a number of small trees that they've discovered that have the same chemistry in the bark. Cinnamon trees are very slow growing is the problem, and all the cinnamon trees in China have been used for this kind of stuff for so many years that there's hardly any left. And that's why I was asking. Number one. Number two, Judy, I'd like to ask you, have you had any experience with hydrogenated terpenes?
Only a little bit. Most terpenes in cannabis are not hydrogenated, which is a little bit unusual. Like we get a little bit of geraniol and linalool and some hydrogenated sesquiterpenes.
Those are hydroxylated. You mean hydroxylated. You don't mean hydrogenated. Hydrogenated is a separate chemical step that you would do to unsaturated compounds.
Right. No, I don't have any experience with hydrogenated terpenes.
Mark just filled out a patent for it. That's why.
I do.
He's like the hydrogenated expert.
That was a loaded question, John. Yeah. Stop doing that.
Yeah, I was just trying to give you a hand from the side state.
Oh, good. Well,
I got a question for Judy. What can you tell us about the terpene synthase in cannabis and evolution? Because you've probably read Hillig's work using terpenes as chemotaxic markers. What do you think that says about the different populations around the world, and why there's such a variation in terpene production or terpene profile?
Yeah, that's the big question, I guess, because like the plant makes the terpenes first, and then humans sort of discover the use for them second. So in terms of the ecological role of terpenes, what they're actually doing for the plant, we have no idea. It could be sort of an antioxidant.
They're pheromones that basically act to encourage beneficial insect populations and that keep bad insects away.
Well, that's the theory. Yeah, I was just wondering if she had any evidence of that.
No, I don't have. Because there's other theories like that they might act as solvents for the cannabinoids, right? Because if you imagine what a trichome head would be like without terpenes in it, it would be sort of very gummy, right? The terpenes turned into a nice light oil.
That's not why they're there, though, because, I mean, humulus, the hops, the closest relative, has huge amounts of terpenes also.
Yeah. But they also have those bitter acids, which are sort of physically quite similar to cannabinoids.
Well, all this talk of terpenes has me dipping. I'm dipping some OG Kush.
Nice.
I myself would presume that the majority of the different terpene smells in cannabis is because of human selection.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at industrial hemp, it has little cannabinoids because of human selection. If you look at ganja varieties, really they just have THC because of human selection. When you look at hashish varieties, they're a combination of THC and CBD. Again, because humans have only selected for plants with lots of resin. They don't smoke individual plants, so they can't tell the difference.
Yeah, but you're
Yeah,
you're talking about, you know, really raising levels above what they would have been in the plant, you know.
No,
in situ,
I'm also
Well, human
talking
selection
about
can
what
do incredible things too. Like terpenes and cannabinoids are chemically related, right? They're made from the same chemical building blocks. So by selecting for increased cannabinoids, we might select for increased terpenes sort of as a side
Absolutely.
effect.
Yeah, but that's not
Absolutely.
the case. We did a whole bunch of work on that. They're
Yeah?
not tied one-to-one.
Oh.
So everybody thinks that they are, but they're not.
No, there's
You
no
get plants
direct
that are high in
relationship.
terpenoids and low in cannabinoids.
No, but they're both innate pathways that are existing in the plant and can be selected for by humans, which
Exactly,
is what
yeah.
Sam's point was.
Right, but my point is that you have to select from something that exists in the first place. You can only enhance what's there.
Correct.
And the evidence of that is that she's looking for, you know, multiple different terpene synthases that exist in the plant. And, you know, my understanding was that there was upwards of 38.
Oh, yeah, probably more than 38. Yeah. But that's not unusual in the plant kingdom. Many plants have upwards of 100 terpene synthases.
Well, a lot of plants also have terpene synthases that produce multiple products.
Yeah,
so you
which
might have,
includes
for example,
cannabis.
a limonene synthase that makes myrcene also.
Yeah. Cannabis terpene synthases are like that too, actually.
So which ones have you, I mean, we don't want to scoop your publication, but what
I do.
What terpenes have you isolated? What synthases have you isolated?
Well, I'm not going to scoop my publications either, but there are a couple like there's a limonene synthase, which also produces a fair bit of alpha-pinene, and an alpha-pinene synthase that produces some from limonene. We have a myrcene synthase, and we have a synthase that produces beta-caryophyllene and alpha-humulene.
Right.
Among others.
Cool.
Which, for me, that's part of, I'm really interested in the idea of trying to breed cannabis strains that only have one terpene. And how that could even, because that would be great, but it should be really difficult because so many of these synthases produce like litters of terpenes all at the same time, right?
Yeah, there's probably going to be some variation in the allelic series that don't produce multiple products.
We spent a decade breeding single cannabinoid varieties, and then I focused on breeding single terpene varieties. But I only did a couple years of work, and then I sort of pretty much retired. But that was my goal for the last decade, was to have or attempt to make single terpene varieties.
Did you get any?
That would have, yes, some exist.
Yeah, there are some that exist naturally. I wouldn't know if you created them.
No, a couple were slightly tweaked and made too.
Yeah, well, for example, Afgui is like an almost exclusively myrcene variety. But most varieties are pretty complex in the terpene fingerprint.
Once people had, and what I wanted was varieties with large amounts of THC and one terpene. That would allow people to decide what it is they like for medical, recreational, religious, whatever use you want. And you could also blend them if you had ones of the top 25, because they're, for recreational and maybe for medical, those are the really important ones, the ones that are in large amounts that people have traditionally selected for because they're effective.
Well, and you can tell that actually in the varieties that we've selected. You know, like for example, I know I keep saying this, but OG is a variety that is, you know, it expresses roughly equal proportions of limonene, beta-caryophyllene, and myrcene, all in relatively high titer. And, you know, limonene and myrcene are both known through our experimentation to, you know, interact with THC and create a synergy. So when you have a variety that is like 28% THC or, you know, over 31% THC acid plus high levels of, you know, those three terpenes, you get a big effect from it, right? And you can see that's what we've already selected it because that's what the market prefers, right? That's why everybody loves OG.
Because
Well,
it's
you know
great
that
for pain. That's what I keep saying. It's a great pain reliever. I look at those terpenes and those combinations with the higher THC and how well it works for pain. For me, at least, I've always paid attention to the higher THC levels with those specific terpenes. So that's what I always seem to focus on. That's what works for me.
Well, you know, the human being has an amazing ability to use the nose. It's more powerful than a lot of people give credence to it. Recently, they did research where they took several guys, put T-shirts on them for a few days, took the T-shirts off, let a bunch of different ladies smell them. Some ladies would smell one T-shirt and go, yuck, and the other ladies would smell it and go, I want to meet him. And basically, what they boiled down was that women's noses have the ability to tell the difference in the DNA of different men, and they need to be attracted to men who have completely different DNA than they do. And so these men smell sexy to them, and that's the story of love and marriage, gang. Hate to pour water on anything for anyone, but the nose knows.
You know, there's a dating company in Vancouver that's doing dating based on that principle now. They're having these smelly T-shirt parties where you wear a T-shirt for a couple of days and then go to a singles mixer and smell everybody's T-shirt.
So I can figure how terpenes are really important in everything that we do. And by the way, every spice, every plant produces them. God, I've made 10,000 extractions over the years. And believe you me, when I've opened up some of the extraction vessels and got that load of pure terpenes back in the face, I had some very amazing days and real eye-openers that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, well, terpenes are semiochemicals, right? Semio comes from the Greek word semeion, which means signal, right? So essentially, they're signaling chemicals in nature that they transfer information on a biological level.
And we all know how terpenes, or some terpenes, can modify or potentiate THC and other cannabinoids. But a funny story is, when I have a cold, I hardly ever get colds. Maybe once every 5 or 10 years I get a cold. But if I have a complete head cold and I can't smell anything, when I smoke my hash or my marijuana, I do not get anywhere near as high because I can't smell any of the terpenes.
Well, that's pretty interesting because I just got some cups from Israel that you put water in and you drink it, but the cup itself smells like orange. And when you tip it up to drink it, the first thing you get is the smell of that orange, and that sets your brain off. And even though you're just drinking pure water, it's exactly smelling like orange or berry or whichever flavor you choose. And they call it the right cup, and they embed terpenes in the molding processes of the cups. It's a great thing for diabetics because diabetics are always drinking sugary drinks, even though it's bad for you because you get thirstier. And so I got these cups because I can drink the amount of water I'm supposed to drink every day for a change. And it's all because the connection between the smell of the cup when I raise it up to drink from it.
You know,
That's interesting.
Thinking about what you just said, that's kind of counterintuitive because if you think about it, it implies that all the effect of the terpenes is going through your, oromucosal, your nasal zone, right? So, but there's a huge amount of terpenes that are inhaled when you're also depending on your smoking method. Like if you're vaping, you're getting huge doses of terpenes right into your lungs.
Maybe it's just a big reduction. All I know is if everybody thinks about it for 1 second, think about when you've had a really, really heavy head cold and you couldn't smell at all, and your nose was completely clogged up, and then you smoked. Did you get as high?
No.
You can't even get high at all when you've got a really bad cold. But you know what? There is a pressure point where you can open it up and then go ahead and enjoy the joint.
Try doing the same thing with a cough drop in your mouth, which is loaded with menthol. And now you're going to get basically this huge rush because you'll have all this menthol in your oral mucosa, right?
What works the best is if you smoke the joint standing on your head under the ocean.
How far under the ocean is required?
5-10 feet's plenty.
Oh, all right.
As I'm sitting here talking with you guys, I did a dab with the Kush cleaner, which is awesome, great, uplifting. And I smelled the Kush cleaner, and I also had this beside me, and I just took it outside, Elena, and she's going to say they smell very similar. These smell similar. Interesting how much I love the Kush cleaner and how this helps me. He made this for me. It just, that synergy of terpenes and works so well, and how yeah, I know, it's just kind of cool. Just very similar flavors. Kush cleaner is killer. And this is
well, I'm looking for some Blue River terps to add to that blend, so I'll try blending it with the
Kush cleaner. Yeah, 100%.
That's funny too, John, because if you think about it, I don't think any of the terpenes she added are found in cannabis.
I know, it's just the flavor is just like
I'm not denying what you're saying is true.
I know that. It was kind of like, while we're talking about this, I'm like, wow, this just happened. Like, I grabbed that one particular terpene and how they work so well together. So adding this into here would be just
limonene and there's linalool and beta caryophyllene in that blend. So there are some similar terpenoids.
And probably some valencine too. Valencine's in that same biochemical pathway that makes those vetiver based terpenes. So there's probably a little bit of that. There could also be nucotone, which is the grapefruit terpene, right? So grapefruit terpene is very related to valencine in that it's just the oxidized form.
Nucotone isn't usually found in cannabis, is it? I don't think I've ever seen it in cannabis.
Nucotone?
Yeah. Is it in there?
The grapefruit, the so-called grapefruit terps. It's, as far as I know, that's nucotone.
Yeah, but it's not found in cannabis.
I've never seen it in cannabis.
You've seen valencine, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Where there's valencine, there's nucotone.
But you need an extra enzyme in between. You need a.
I'm not sure. I think that's you could actually biologically oxidize valencine up to
like caryophyllene oxide.
Dihydronucotone first, which is the hydroxylated material, and then that quickly oxidizes up because it's in conjugation.
I've vaped caryophyllene oxide. Nasty.
Yeah, no, it's not pleasurable.
Isn't that what they train the dogs on?
Yes.
Yeah. It is nasty.
Which of these terpenes should not be inhaled at all?
I don't think there's enough safety data on that anywhere.
Yeah. With cannabis, people have been smoking them for hundreds of years. So if anything was really dangerous, people would know.
No, right, then my other question is this then, is a terpene like a color, where a color can be light or at full spectrum, you know, or can a terpene be, you know, at 10% of a terpene's potential or 100%? Is there a scale of terpene like there's a scale of color?
Sounds like just dilution to me. I mean, the molecule is the molecule, right?
Like if it's on the plant and the sun hit it, one terpene would be at 20%, whereas another terpene could be expressing itself at 100%. Is there a way we measure this?
No, we only measure total terpene content and then the relative fingerprint.
Hey, so, Todd, are you off the hook now?
There's no hook, John. There's no hook. And, you know, the thing is, you know, John, I've thought, you know, I was initially rated in 2012, and they charged me in 2013, way before there was ever a Prop 64. And technically, under medical marijuana laws, no, Prop 64 did not let me off the hook. It is most likely going to dismiss the case because, well, like we saw in other legal states, the prosecutors just gave up.
Hey, Todd, please try replugging in your mic. You are wavy and we can't hear you. You sound like a robot.
Well, anyway, I hope they drop your case, buddy.
Me too.
Yeah, we all feel that.
We all do. We all hope so. It's ridiculous. It's a plant.
It would definitely be strange if someone was like, "I don't hope so." Be like,
well,
boom,
Todd and I were actually talking about this the other day because he would actually like to fight it, and he's got Tony Serra as his law. And you know, it's when you've got.
You guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Technically, under California law, it's the same as it was prior to anybody coming up with 64. and it's that you can go and present a medical necessity defense in front of a California jury, and you'll probably get acquitted if there's no guns or other drugs or other things associated with it. And I still think that's the same thing. What's probably going to happen, though, John, is they're going to go in and it'll probably get dismissed, because that's what we're seeing happen. You know, we're seeing prosecutors that have no heart to go after these cases anymore, and they don't want to spend money out of their budgets. And in places like I am, Alameda County, with all the crap they have going on, I'm sure prosecuting cannabis people is a very low priority. So I've always expected it, and that's why I fought it to go away. And they're probably going to dismiss it. And what 18 was just saying is, I have always almost looked forward to it, because Tony Serra is my attorney. He's been a hero to me since I started studying civil rights. And I kind of was looking forward to sitting behind him as he went into a marijuana trial, because I went to prison for 5 years and I'm not afraid of what could happen. Most likely, even if I lost, it would only be probation. And if more people recognized what they were facing, more people would be bold and they wouldn't worry about going to court, going through the system, coming home, growing pot, and then breaking the system through their just ambivalence to the ignorant laws. So nothing bad's gonna happen either way.
Also, the reason they don't want to prosecute you anymore, Todd, is because they keep ratings of every DA. And no DA wants to take a case to court and lose.
Well, I'd like to point out something else too. The people that were in power in the federal government are the same people that were going after BPG. They're no longer in office. You've seen a whole regime change happen, and the people that have come in and inherited the dirty laundry of their predecessors, they don't want it. They're looking for ways to get rid of it. You know, I mean, we saw that with Harborside. We saw that with BPG. We're going to see that up and down the state now with state prosecutors, because it's just not there. Are you going to bring a marijuana case in front of, you know, what is basically 6 out of 10 people who have already voted to legalize the activity?
Not a chance. They're going to have to back off, bro, because they understand those guys are elected too. And they want to get reelected, and they're not going to get reelected by prosecuting people like you for pot anymore. Pot is not, I mean, let's face it, it went legal, so.
Well, in a state of 40 million, there are thousands and thousands of cases like mine that not only are people going to get out, but if anyone listening to this has a conviction in California for a cannabis crime, no matter if it was a misdemeanor or a felony, they can go to a lawyer, and a lawyer can petition the court to have that removed now. So people that are sitting in jail right now are going to be able to actually petition the court for a resentencing, because their prior convictions will be removed and their sentences will not be as harsh, because crimes of marijuana are no longer crimes, and they're going to have their records cleared. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, we saw Omar was writing the other day on how a gentleman had already been sitting in jail, and he repetitioned the court, and the court saw that he had already served his 6 months that he was now sentenced to due to it being taken down from a felony to a misdemeanor, and he was let go.
Yes, so more people listening can do terpene research in their own homes by legally growing cannabis. And really, I don't want to say it rudely, but don't worry about the repercussions. I only wish everybody was willing to just face the court system and go through it. Because if we all pled not guilty and wanted trials, it would overwhelm them.
Well,
Literally.
let's be honest. The reason is because it's very costly and expensive. It costs me an ungodly amount of money to fight the United States government for 3+ years, as well as, you know, it wasn't cheap for you, and you had a pro bono attorney.
But
so
I didn't have a pro bono attorney. I've spent almost $50,000 on it. But the point is really that you can do this with a public defender. You don't have to spend money. You have a right to counsel, and literally, if you just brave it, people would break the system all over the country. Because this is something they could do, and realistically, juries have the right to acquit. You just have to have the courage to go through with it.
Well, we're wasting so much human resource by putting the guys in jail, paying to keep them there, stifling innovation, because a lot of the people that are in jail for pot were real innovators and early pioneers. They were just the first ones to get swept up in the so-called drug war. And if we let all of those people out of jail right now, the massive amount of money we would save, we could get rid of private prisons, which they're doing anyway, but close tomorrow afternoon if we let all the pot prisoners out. And just let the police department focus on real crimes instead of busting hippies for smoking pot. I mean, the police already shoot a lot of innocent people. The two things they do is they shoot innocent people and they arrest hippies for pot. Those are the two major strengths that the police department have. That's why they've gotten all this new military equipment so they can drive your front door down with a tank or throw a flashbang grenade in with your family.
Well, I'll say this. Unfortunately, in my 5 years in jail and prisons, I didn't meet as many hippies as I did minorities. And the one reason I was so vocal about 64 passing is because it takes away this, you know, marijuana nightstick so that cops could selectively prosecute against whoever they felt like prosecuting. If they didn't like the way you looked or the color of your skin or what was on your T-shirt, Mr. Science, they could turn around, make you cuff up, and arrest you for misdemeanor amounts of cannabis. That has now ended. And I think that really there has to be an education about what our rights are now, because we are all almost traumatized by the psychology of prohibition. In California, speaking, in a way, and in the United States. And now we're not going to have to act that way anymore, because now if there is a half an ounce of weed in our pocket and we bump into a cop, that is totally legal if you're over 21.
And that's the most incredible thing that people always say, we don't need a license, it's a plant. It's like, okay, I totally agree with your utopian version of how it should be, and I want that. In the meantime, when you say almost, I was absolutely like PTSD from being arrested and put in jail and had all my cannabis taken. And I was always very, very, very like paranoid after that of driving. I would never smoke in my vehicle. I didn't want to carry anything with me. I became like paranoid of the police because I knew once you know, and it's not the end of the world, don't get me wrong, but it is a random thing that they can just pull you out of your life and then put you in the lockup for.
Well, Mark, the whole thing about cops is it's great when they're going after killers, bank robbers.
Oh no, I get that. I get that.
But they use the same mentality when they're coming to arrest you for pot.
Listen, and not only that, John, they do the same thing when they're coming to your area to apparently someone called in yesterday about a bear loose in Lions Bay, which makes sense because we live in a forest. And I drove down with my family and saw 3 RCMP out of their vehicles with assault rifles in their hands and looking super aggressive and mad, like they were at like an armed and barricaded call or something. But I guarantee you it was a bear because they were looking at the map of our trail system, and the lady was looking at the map while the other 2 were standing there with assault rifles. And I thought that seems a little extreme. I've had bears on my deck. I didn't go run for a gun. I mean,
do the maps have bear trails marked on them?
Well, the maps have our trails marked on them, and the bears, of course, use our trails. They're not stupid. They're bears. They're like, hey, look, there's a trail over here. We should use this trail instead of walking through the middle of the forest. So, and what's that?
I was just wondering if beaver trails are marked.
I'm not giving no comment on the beaver trails. I will say when people ask, does the bear shit in the woods? I will say yes, and almost consistently on the fucking trail. So
no, you know, I saw a bear and a rabbit taking a crap next to a small pond, and the bear leaned over to the rabbit and said, hey, do you have trouble with shit sticking to your fur? And the rabbit said no, and the bear grabbed him and wiped his ass.
I have heard this joke. Of course,
don't quit your day job, Indra. That's all I'm gonna say.
Eddie Murphy.
Right. Don't give up extractions, buddy. Comedy is not your calling.
Hey, but you know what? I like the fact that his attempt was to make us smile. And if that wasn't the pure intention, I don't know what is.
Somebody out there in Hash Church land smiled.
I smiled.
I smiled a lot, but unfortunately, it wasn't at the joke.
You have permagrin over there, buddy. What are you talking about? You're just sitting in that chair smiling the entire time.
I've never seen him not smile on Hash Church.
I've never seen Hash Church with nobody smoking on the whole panel. Something's wrong here, guys.
Are you kidding me?
Darren's not here. Bong rip. This guy is gone.
Hey,
I just have to say, I have some beautifulness here. This is rosin and dry sift made from the dry sift that I had here. So I was like having fun, but just I can't even tell. So stable, just awesome. Triceps, awesome.
I have a question for the panel. I was written by a gentleman by the name of Ian Medeiros. I was wondering if you guys could discuss the potential effects of cannabis in patients. Let's see, using it to take TNF blockers such as Remicade or Humira. They are very popular treatments for patients with Crohn's, arthritis, and for myself, iritis. I have been on 500 milligrams per kilogram of Remicade for over a decade, which is almost unheard of, especially in someone as young as I was when he started. I'm more or less curious, is the activation and stimulation of my CB2 receptor may be counteracting the Remicade, as cannabis may be a TNF inhibitor? If this is the case, do I stay away from high CBD cultivars that help my glaucoma, or does the CBD help the Remicade by regulating the CB2 functions, therefore requiring less assistance from the Remicade? I know a lot of people medicate for these reasons, and you have yet to find any data on the relations between cannabis and TNF blockers.
God, that's horrible. Excuse me, between your eyes and your asshole.
Yeah,
so TNF alpha blockers, so what they're doing is they're blocking TNF alpha. So this is a pro-inflammatory cytokine, tumor necrosis factor alpha. It plays a role in a lot of different things. It's an early immune modulator, so it plays a big role in fever, inflammation, bacterial infections, and it plays a role in a lot of these inflammatory diseases. So I can speak to it with regards to inflammatory bowel disease. The condition this person's talking about is an inflammatory eye condition, so that's also a major side effect for patients with Crohn's and colitis, because the inflammation in the gut spills over to the whole body and these patients get inflammation everywhere. So TNF alpha blockers are also used for patients with multiple sclerosis and other inflammatory conditions. And they work pretty well. So what they do is they block TNF alpha. And so there's less of this pro-inflammatory cytokine. And so the question this person asked was how cannabis could work, or if it was interfering with this. So this is a great question. More research definitely needs to be done. There is no data looking at how cannabis and TNF alpha blockers work together. That being said, cannabis is in general anti-inflammatory. That's pretty much what the anecdotal experience has been, as well as cell culture experiments, animal experiments. And cannabidiol is particularly anti-inflammatory, and it works through the CB2 receptor. So I don't think this would be a concern taking it like with an anti-TNF blocker. I think it would either be complementary or you would be able to reduce your medication. That being said, I'm not a medical doctor. I don't have experience working with patients with these conditions. I can just tell you based on the literature what would most likely be happening. And I also want to say, like, there's a lot of ways you can eat, just modify your diet to actually change your inflammatory response, and especially with TNF alpha. So there's clinical trials showing just specific foods, for instance, cherries, pomegranates, and orange juice have all in individual studies been shown to reduce this this pro-inflammatory compound. So it's hard to give you a specific answer and say yes or no, because there is no research showing that. But in general, I would say it is not a concern, and cannabis should be able to be used together and should be able to help you reduce your TNF blockers, because it's also targeting inflammation. And even with these TNF alpha blockers, like, exactly how they're working is still not totally unknown. There's still side effects to these medications. And I know with Crohn's and colitis, up to 40% of patients actually lose responsiveness to these drugs, so they no longer work. And so that's part of the reason researching cannabis for Crohn's and colitis, to help patients who are unresponsive to these therapies. And maybe your dose that it has to keep increasing, perhaps you're losing responsiveness, because there's a number of TNF blockers. So, I mean, they target them in different ways too. So it can this is a complicated question. Does anyone else have anything to add?
Terpinolene also acts through TNF, I believe. So there might be a link
love me
there.
some terpinolene.
But that's varieties like Jack Hare
Well,
or
cannabis,
Trainwreck.
like,
So you might want to play with those
again,
varieties.
no, but it's broad spectrum. Like cannabis has many different ways that it's targeting inflammation. So even like limonene has some activity in animal studies anyway, potentially targeting TNF alpha. Even linalool has some activity on these inflammatory compounds. So there's probably a multitude of compounds in cannabis that are affecting these pathways. But in general, they're targeting like pathways that suppress inflammation. So Mark had forwarded me this question, so I just was looking around a little bit to see what else I could find. And I know there was some people saying that THC can increase TNF alpha. That's not true. I haven't seen, there was one cell culture experiment where they showed some changes, but overall THC is also anti-inflammatory. It doesn't necessarily work in the same way. It does other things like other Th1 pro-inflammatory markers like interferon gamma, THC can suppress. So in general, the cannabis plant is suppressing inflammation. So it's good for people with inflammatory conditions. But more research needs to be done. So this again is with anecdotal evidence, cell culture, and animal experiments. So we need more clinical data to confirm this. And before people like me and other healthcare professionals can make recommendations like that. So it's a complicated question.
Yeah, I would say if you're out there and you're a patient, you're looking for, that something like that specifically, check out a variety like Trainwreck or Jack Hare varieties. See if you can find a variety that has terpinolene in it. And just play with it and see what it does for you. That's all. There is no science on any of these really, cannabis has such a wide variety of, conditions that it can work for. We just haven't done all the studies. There hasn't been enough science behind
and it's
a lot of the different studies. So it's really still up to the patient to try and use science to look for varieties that are going to work for them, is the way I look at it right now, because we just don't have that science that says, it does this for this condition.
It's so subjective too. That's one of the frustrations that we find when a patient shows up and they're like, hey, I've got this specific condition, so tell me what type of cannabis I need. And I'm like, well, here you go. We have to start the trial and error, and that's why the great thing about now starting to get the breakdown of terpenes and this deeper understanding besides THC and CBD, it's helping patients start to narrow things down a little better. I mean, it's just another mechanism to help start narrowing the field down.
But don't you feel that what work, like I can take an aspirin, you can take an aspirin, your headache will go away, mine won't. It doesn't mean aspirin worked or didn't work in a sense. It means we have different biological systems that handled it differently. So, I mean, isn't that the case with every single variety or a mix of cannabinoids and terpenes?
It's so subjective.
Almost every single person, yeah.
It's so subjective to every individual, and that's why when people say, well, what is the cancer bud? What is this bud? And it's like that's where we have to bring them down to earth a bit and say, there isn't a cancer bud, there isn't an anemia bud, there isn't a specific flower for a specific condition yet. We don't have double-blind studies on anything that can confirm any of that, and everything that I know is anecdotal and trial by error, correct?
Yeah.
Well,
marketing, and marketing says, hey, this does that, and this does that, and this does that. So when they walk into your place looking for something to cure that they are talking about, it's because they're conditioned by marketing. Sorry, Sam.
No problem. We did do double-blind tests with organoleptic survey before and after for only the top 10 or 12 terpenes with THC. So that's, as far as I know, all that's happened and that was done, gee whiz, more than a decade ago.
Well, and there's 50 years of research on the biological activity of terpenes. So the biological activity of terpenes is well known and documented in the literature, and so even in humans in clinical conditions. So the hints are out there that we just have to put it all together.
And one thing we can say for sure, because I had a dozen subjects who took these tests with me, all double blind, so they had no idea what they were trying. But when it was spiked with THC, so we spiked the smallest amount of a single terpene that we could. And they all agreed almost 100% on the type of effects. So they would agree that limonene was up, clear, speedy, bright. They would agree that myrcene in large amounts was more couch-lock. And they also agreed that both limonene and myrcene potentiated THC and made it stronger. Also pinene, they said, made it stronger. And a few other things. Mostly they were directional, so they modified THC to very different directions, more than potentiating.
Yeah.
I mean, what is known is that, these things act somewhat as solvents to start increasing the fluidity in the bilayer. And so you're going to start getting just channels getting turned on. Again, I liken it to opening the windows at your house. You're just going to start exchanging information between the interior and the exterior of the cell. So along with that, I think goes upregulation of cannabinoid receptors, because things are just turning on. Things are just happening. And terpenes are known to do this. They intercalate into the bilayer, and they just make stuff start going through the membrane that wouldn't normally go through.
They intercalate into the bilayer.
Well, they fit in there. They increase the fluidity, is what the authors in the paper said.
I preferred it the first way that you said it, so thank you.
They are actually part of the basic mechanism of the universe, which is cannabis osmosis.
Indeed. I love the random quiet moments of Hash Church.
Somebody just wrote me from Maine saying that they're limited to 2.5 ounces of flower, and how is that possible when you're able to grow 6 flowering plants? And I think that a lot of the fantasies that the legislation has come up with about plant limits and the amounts we can carry in time will just erode away, because they're not realistic. It's a plant and it comes in abundance. Mother Nature doesn't hold back. She gives us a ton of the stuff, and it's not going to stop. And I mean, I can't speak for Maine, I don't know, but here in California, you can grow 6 plants, you can keep all of it. You just supposedly can only ride around with 1 ounce of it at any given time. But now the smelling of marijuana is not probable cause to search. So if you have more than 1 ounce in your bag, you don't have to consent to a search because the police officer smells marijuana, because you have a different basis of rights now.
Well, also with your discussion is, we can move these lines. See, you can now, the line is a discussion point. You can now lobby their local municipalities as well as at the state level and start changing things, such as here in California, we need to change now the criminalization between 18 to 21. We also need to raise the 8 grams. There's different, for concentrates, there's different things now, because we now have certain lines in the sand that have completely changed the discussion. Now we can start working on those discussion points and start, triangulating and hitting these effectively.
Most of the state
go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Most of the state police here in California, if you're not an asshole when they stop you, you're not going to have anything happen. I was in a pickup truck with my son, and we were behind a bunch of motorhomes, and the bicycle racers on the coast had the traffic blocked for a little while. And then the bicycle race went by, and the trooper looked back and saw us sitting in this little truck, and he says, "Come on up." And so I drove up, and he says, "I'll tell you when to go." And my window was rolled up because we'd been smoking pot. and I said, "Okay." And he said, "No, roll your window down." And I said, "No, I can hear you." And he said, "Roll your window down." I rolled the window down, and he goes, "Sir, I smell marijuana." And I said, "That's my son. He's got a license to smoke it, and he smokes for pain. And by the way, I'm taking him to the doctor now about that." And so I hand him Johnny's 215 license out the window. He reads it, hands it back to me, and says, "Okay." He says, "But that doesn't mean that you can smoke it." And I said, "Whatever gave you that idea?" And so he waved us on, and we drove off down the road. But in the backseat of the truck, we had like 4 kilos of very good oil we were taking.
And I love that. But you know what? That is what happened. That's last week. And in a sense, the part I didn't like about decriminalization or medicalization was selective prosecution. And, you know, if he likes you and you're cool and you're smooth, you roll. But if he doesn't like you, pulls you over, rips your car apart, finds those kilos you just mentioned, and, you know, you got a case. And
I'm very cute, though, Todd. So.
Oh, no, and you're smooth, too. And you're smooth. So I'm sure you get right through it, you know. But unfortunately, you know, I think that these laws have been used so selectively, and that's the part that really disheartened me. You know, selective prosecution is an ugly social injustice that I think we all have to be realistic about the fact that it hovers around marijuana prohibition like stink on a dog.
As long as we have this way of looking at things for grabbing people and putting them in jail, that's a business, and you're interrupting a business that these guys have going, and they're not happy about that. And the selective prosecution is about, they take a look at you and see you're not going to be able to fight back, so we're going to prosecute your ass. And also you've got a bunch of people who've got their own thing to grind, and they're after enemies or people they don't like, or maybe the wife said this person's an asshole and he looks for him and gives him a ticket. It's humanity at work and at its worst, which is seems like what we keep rising to the occasion on that one. We keep lowering the bar. But hopefully this legalization, although I disagree with some of the points of it, hopefully it takes more and more power out of the hands of those who do perpetrate things like that and who use justice as a tool to adjudicate their own personal emotions and lives.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll second your emotion that I don't like parts of it too. You know what? And this will sound funny, but I don't think that they should have held back 60 months on the Tier 5 licenses. I think that people need cannabis, and I've caught mega shit for saying corporate cannabis. But you know what? I'm an organic vegetarian, but I'm not afraid of corporate broccoli. And I wouldn't argue to make canned broccoli illegal, you know, to boast to the market of, you know, small broccoli farmers. It would be ridiculous. And you know, I think that the chemicals in cannabis would help society a great deal. And I really wish there were canned cannabis in every supermarket and people could buy it, pick it up, put it in their food, get it in their system, stop drinking, stop popping pills. It would be a better place.
Canned broccoli, though? I mean, that sounds as tasty as, say, canned liver.
Well, you know what? Look, I don't smoke mid-grade weed, but you know what? I wish it was there for society. 59 cents a can, buy your mids. I would be thrilled for people. They would be happy, you know?
Dude, Irv was so happy with his mid-grade to even potentially lower than mid-grade 300 joints a month. We're all trying to figure out a way to get him something better, and he's like, guys, it works for me. I'm happy with it.
So you're advocating Soylent Green? Is that it? Are we?
No.
Mark is mentioning about the government-grown pot that goes to the one of 2 legal recipients from the federal government. His name's Irvin Rosenfeld, and they give him pot that's sometimes 4 and 5 years old because it shows a manufacturing date, and then the date of his prescription's like 4 years later. So they're giving him really subpar cannabis, and it's helping him with his medical condition, which in many ways shows that it's the chemicals in cannabis. And we're here talking about the terpenes and the nuances, but these cannabinoids are doing some really beneficial things to the people who are brave enough to put the cannabis in their bodies. And that's why I am not against corporate cannabis, canned cannabis, cheap cannabis, mid-can. I'm not against cannabis at all.
How about Soylent? Are you against Soylent? Corporate Soylent?
I don't know what that is there.
There's an actual food that's actually called Soylent, which is actually just a water add food. So you have to be specific what you're talking about.
And that would fall under no.
I'm
a food snob, John. For 20 years, I've been annoying my friends everywhere we go out to eat. Vegetarian, organic.
Not me. Never annoys me.
Me and Mark do well together. Love you too, bro.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
Todd, because in the future, you're going to be able to buy cannabis at Uncle Sam's Christmas tree farm turned cannabis farm.
Emporium.
10,000 acres, with 1,000 plants on each acre.
And you just walk through with the guy and he saws down the one you want, like Christmas trees?
And you take it away on your pickup truck.
Can I ask the panel, like guys like you, Camara, what's up? I'm so sick of hearing Monsanto's making killer weed, and I just feel that cannabis doesn't lend itself to ever a corporate takeover, because I was a little 13-year-old boy growing weed in my closet, and I was happy with the outcome. It's not that hard. And is there any proof that Monsanto is coming in to take over our ganja? Anyone?
That's ridiculous. They're not gonna. They wouldn't do that. They've too much to risk at this point in time, and they have enough money to just buy whoever becomes the leading guy. So, no, they're going to be one of those companies that sits on the side for the next however long until it's fully legal, and then they'll jump in and start acquiring people like Scott's did.
Well, could I argue that it's not possible? There's so much cannabis in public domain, so much diversity, that how could a corporation come and say, "I've got your Marlboro"? We would all look at them and laugh.
Well, they wouldn't take it over, but like he said, they're going to wait for the people who grow the best and find themselves in the highest positions, and you'll see them come in and scoop these companies up. Might be 5-10 years from now.
So that's fine. So there can be Budweisers, but nobody's going to come along and steal beer away from the people.
It depends on what. Yeah. Well, because
Monsanto bought up all the goddamn soybean farmers everywhere that way. So what makes you think they're not going to jump in when the time is right and buy up all the pot farmers?
But can we all say that jumping into a market is very different from like the potheads' fear of they're going to come and take over our ganja, which is, I feel, not possible.
Well, you're my hero, but reality sometimes is a cold shower when you need it. And I think that fact you mentioned has a dark side to it as well.
Which one? You think Monsanto is going to come along and grow tons of weed and put it in cans and sell it at supermarkets? Could happen.
No, I think eventually down the road, they'll decide to acquire things. They don't jump in. When they jump, all the earth around for miles shakes, because when they make a move, they make it very big, very aggressively. And what'll happen is when they do decide to get in, we'll be sitting around wondering how the fuck they got in there and got that much control so fast.
Well, but that's, again, we have to buy their product. I mean, I always thought McDonald's would cease to exist if everybody did what I did, which is not give them a penny.
Did it work?
So we vote with our dollar louder than we vote with our voice. So if we just shifted the way we spend money.
And right now, Americans are eating, I think 90% of the corn is GMO, 100% of the sugar beets is GMO, and huge percentages of all the other major crops. I mean, Americans just shovel it down.
Yeah. Soy.
Well, you know,
Sam, we're not allowed to know on a package if it is or not, right?
And corn is in everything. I think they make like 20 or 30 different things from corn. And if you
don't forget corn syrup.
Well, that's just one of the like 20 plus things. If you look at the corn facility, the processing facility, Michael Pollan writes about it in The Omnivore's Dilemma, how you go back to the outside of this facility and there's just all these different pipes that are like spewing out different products that basically are the filler, much like peanut protein isolate used to be the filler for everything. That's just massive amounts of that shit got consumed by Americans over the course of the last 100 years, like mountains of it. And now it's corn.
Lot of hemorrhoids.
What's that?
That peanut stuff created a lot of hemorrhoids. I think the number, Sam, for how much corn is GMO is more like 100%. I don't think it's 90%, because there's not 10% people out there trying to grow non-GMO corn.
You could be right. I'm looking at numbers from a few years ago, because I've been members of several groups that have been concerned about this for decades, and we saw it coming. We saw the globalization of the seed and pharmaceutical companies, and that is the way of the future. But you don't have to be part of it. You can join groups like the Seed Savers Exchange, and they sell open pollinated heritage brand everything, or you can get it for free if you're a member.
I only use them. My garden has only heritage plants growing in it. I mean, when I grow tomatoes, they not only taste like tomatoes, when you're walking out to get some of them, you can smell them from 50 feet away that they're tomatoes already. And
well, my wife's a tomato grower, and she loves Cherokee Purple and Brandywine, but they both split to a bit. You know, I mean, sometimes it's hard to get them into your kitchen before the skins are splitting. So I can see why the store people don't like them, because they don't care about quality. They care about profit.
yeah, they care about longevity. How long will that sit on the shelf before it goes bad? And that's sad because by the time they breed the smell and all of that out of the tomato, so it will sit on the shelf for 3 weeks, it tastes like a cucumber. And you just, you know, heritage tomatoes, I grow the little ones, I grow the Romas and the beefsteak ones. And when I cut one open in the kitchen, I mean, you can just smell it all over the house. And it makes a huge difference. I don't like corporate grown tomatoes, Todd. Sorry.
No, John, I don't either, but that's my point. My point is that even though I'm not a customer for canned broccoli, I'm not arguing to keep it illegal. And I think that vegetables are good for people, so I think there should be in every store. And I feel the same way with cannabis, is my point. It's not that you have to eat canned tomatoes. It's just that there's a place for them in society.
I understand that, and I'm with you on that one. I just I have a lot of objections about processed food, and so that's a whole other story.
Yeah, there's both sides to the coin for sure. I mean, I'm not a big fan of them myself, but if you're like growing up in some harsh environment that you don't have access to anything else, then the access to that becomes fairly important. Just to at least still have access to something that would be considered a vegetable is probably better than something that is not a vegetable at all.
Can I add a nuance to this? And it's that, you know, in the mid 20th century, we realized the importance of vitamins and minerals, and we started putting them in our foods, and it helped us amazingly. And now cannabinoids are doing the same thing. And imagine if people get access to cannabinoids on the level that they really got the access to vitamins and minerals in the 40s and 50s. And it really revolutionized the way we ate, because now these cannabinoids may well be the preventive medicine we need to balance our bodies if the endocannabinoid system is at all correct, what it's showing us, and it's important.
And Todd, is that going to take away any of the fun? I mean, we used to be the outsiders, the outlaws, the people living, you know, in the shadows. And, gee, some of that was fun, at least a little bit of it.
The outlaw shine is going to diminish a bit, bro. Yeah.
I'm happy.
It's hard to get a suntan in the shadows, though, isn't it?
Well, it's like Calio, you know, it's a great cannabis you can grow. However, it's not one you want to smoke every day, but I could see a lot of new smokers, if some large corporation were growing it, and the attraction to that genetic as a first-time try, because it's something that's light, not necessarily heavy, but it has a familiarization because of the scent of orange that's there. But you know, the THC isn't high. It wasn't one of those that I would smoke, but I would grow it in my stable because people liked it, and I wouldn't use it myself. So that's just how it was.
I've got Calio from back in the 70s.
Yeah, I've always appreciated the smell of it, that's for sure. Walking into Shanti Baba's greenhouses in Bellinzona in like 2002 or 3, and he had an acre under glass of Calio like 7.5 weeks into flower, was, I mean, honestly, I teared up. Like, it was amazing. I was with Bog, Bushy Older Grower, and I was with Gypsy Nirvana and Shanti Baba, and it was an unforgettable experience to walk through some of those greenhouses, especially that Calio one, and just be, the smell was so good and so uplifting and incredible that it was just, I mean, the jokes that we were making were absurd, but man, spending the night in that greenhouse would have been something. It was truly
that Pure's Calio?
Yeah,
Calio skunk, because really a lot more of those were made.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure. I'd have to ask Scott, but I would say 9 out of 10, it was a pure Calio. It wasn't what was considered strong, like Etienne said, for smoking, but flavor-wise, to have it burning in the room or a bag of it or just to have a taste of it was definitely...
That was given to me by the grower breeder at a harvest festival in Santa Rosa in the late 70s, early 80s. And he gave it to me to run with. And yeah, at the time, I thought it was my favorite cannabis because it was an indica sativa hybrid and really reminded me a lot of skunk, although they really had no similarities in smell or taste, but they were both very strong, vigorous, really nice to smoke indica sativa hybrids.
I like when Sam gets serious that you see his hands come out onto the camera with the dabber, and then he's like, all right, this is serious.
My mother must have been Italian.
That's awesome, man. I love it. Don't ever change. 792 people watching live right now, episode 112 here on Hash Church. Got a whole bunch of people chatting it up in the chat room, and good stuff. Yeah, an hour and a half of good conversation so far. I love that it just...
Can I bring up one other little thing? Everybody that's in California who doesn't have a California medical card should go get one because they can now avoid having to pay the state sales tax on medical cannabis purchases. Could you explain that there, ATM, please, Mr. Have a Pot Club?
Yes, because I also went and got my my card because I myself am also exempt, and so I made a purchase the other day, and I saved $35 in taxes by having my my state issued card. So here, such as in Alameda County, you have to make an appointment. So you need to have a copy of your doctor's note. You need to have a current ID that's a California ID. You also have to have a proof of residency, which is some sort of a bill or something specifically to that address within the last 30 days. And then you have to also download paperwork and fill out a form. But for Alameda County, it costs $103 for the actual card for 1 year. And they changed the card. It no longer has your name on it. It just has an ID number. It has your picture. And it's more for if law enforcement has a number on there and it calls in and verifies that you're in the state database. So this is, it also lets you have entrance into any dispensary. Now, currently with the new law that just went into effect, no one is selling recreational cannabis. Recreational cannabis sales won't start until January 1, 2018. So we're dealing with local municipalities and various situations currently, but I do recommend the state card because I made purchases, like I said, the other day, and I saved $35. So just 2 more shopping times, and I'll have paid for my.
You do realize that there's a ton of people selling recreational pot in California.
Oh yeah, and it hasn't stopped. It's been going on before the law, and it's not going to stop. You know, since the law has changed, everybody thinks like the black market's going to somehow go away, but in time, the prices of quality and change will all change the complete dynamic.
When will allow 6 plants for each individual?
Oh, you can start growing immediately, such as
it's already now today.
Yeah, it started
midnight after the election.
The law passed; those went into effect. Such as for us, we received the next day from the State Board of Equalization stating.
Do you have a database with all the mailing address of all the adults in California? I'll send them a present.
Not yet. So right now we're just dealing with educating people that, you know, we can't serve people over 21 yet. It's one, the city of Berkeley is most of these cities have passed moratoriums saying, no, we're going to hold off on cannabis until we decide what legislation we're going with. So even here in Berkeley, they have to decide on how they're going to regulate it, as well as the state. The state has to decide what their the circumstances, because I don't know if medical sellers will be allowed in the recreational market, or will it be like, you know, Colorado, where I'll have one door where it's recreational, the other is medicinal. But, you know, medicinal is left in place, as well as all your protections under 215 for, you know, plant numbers. The 6 plants is for people who are not patients. It's for adults.
E10, Humboldt County Craigslist, and you will find at least 100 people who will deliver to your door pretty much any amount and a variety of.
And that's been going on for decades. Nothing's changed there, right?
And the thing is, under medical, you still have the right to present your defense. This doesn't change that at all.
I've called them all. Not a single one of them would deliver to my house.
Yeah, I have the same problem. I don't live close enough to where it's mostly Eureka and up in that area that the Humboldt Craigslist is proliferated with people who are selling everything from clones to freshly cut whole plants.
Well, everybody's confident, see, and this is the thing that bothered me. The loudest voices against legalization are coming from within the cannabis community. I mean, and that to me is troubling because when I started arguing with these people who were against 64, I started asking them, are you under 30? And a lot of them, yeah. Oh, yeah, so you were 10 years old when we passed 215, and you don't even remember what it was like to live under the draconian drug laws that ruined many of our lives. And now they've been making money the last few years. They think everything's groovy. They use Craigslist. Their friends don't get busted, and they want to keep it this way. And that creeps me out. It really creeps me out because they're not seeing the bigger picture when they're arguing against social change that would benefit them, like we just had.
When that all started, those people were still shitting green stuff in their diapers. And so you have to understand their point of reference. And they don't have the history.
Right.
They don't have understanding of the history. Because, listen, I can remember thinking back when I was 20, at that point in time, like you could sit on a bench in Berkeley and smoke a joint, police car would drive by, cop would shoot you the peace sign. Then 10 years later, same cops, same bus stop, you whip a joint out and start smoking it, and all of a sudden guys attack you from everywhere in ninja outfits. And time keeps changing and changing and changing. And I got to the point actually when I was around 60, and I thought, I wonder if ever it's going to be legal. And so for me, when it turned legal, although I have an objection to a lot of the ways they express it and everything, it was a start. And it actually sent a shiver through me because I realized that I had lived this long because I was waiting for pot to get legalized.
Well, you saw it. Congratulations, man.
Congrats, John.
It feels so liberating to see an end to slavery in our own small way, and I do liken it to us being enslaved, going to the prisons. It's really shitty the way they steal our stuff and they rob us and they rip our families apart and all over a flower. It's just unfathomable, really.
Yeah, it's not humane. That's the problem with it. It's completely non-humane treatment because you're ruining a family's life over a plant. And plants and animals shouldn't be illegal.
When I started smoking, it was 1965. And the police at that time, they objectified pot users. In other words, you weren't a human being that deserved compassion. You were a person who was obviously some sort of a deviant criminal and deserved to be punished.
That's right. Hey, Sam, I beat you by 1 year. I smoked my first joint in 1964 in Vietnam.
Yeah, well, you were in Vietnam, so I'm not sure I would have gone to smoke a joint a year earlier.
Yeah, and you were also under fire. Come on.
Guess what? That joint still got me very fucking high.
That I can believe, because you were probably smoking Thai weed.
Well, I was, and I didn't know it. We were both hiding behind wheels on a distant-half truck on the side of the road, and one of the cooks, a black guy, tossed it to me and said, try that. Literally, I was pissing myself before that, and I was shaking like a leaf because bullets land real close to you and hit rocks, and then the rocks would explode, and they would sting your face and hit you, and it didn't add to the experience. I mean, it just jacked up the adrenaline thing way up. And smoking that joint made everything slow down and made me realize that I was oversensitized. Those little stinging rocks wasn't that big a deal as long as I wasn't being hit by a bullet. And it was a wake-up day for me. You know, I was just over 17 years old, and there I was getting shot at. Wasn't even sure why, but I was there.
A literal baptism by fire.
Yeah.
Literally and figuratively.
Well, I'll tell you, I smoked my first joint at 14 behind like a garbage dumpster behind a store. And it was quite different. There was no, you know, aside from the fact that obviously because we were beside a garbage dumpster, a BFI can behind a store, we were also still in that mentality of like, if you smoke cannabis, you're like some sort of deviant criminal, much like what Sam was talking about in 1965. It wasn't too much different in 1987 or 86 or whenever it was that I was smoking that first joint. But glad to say nobody was shooting bullets at me. That's, I can't really imagine.
You can imagine how strong the pot was to override the adrenaline that was pumping through my hiney at that moment. And believe you me, I could feel the adrenal glands squeezing themselves dry while I was sitting there. I was so excited that I was vibrating off the ground because you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to die here. That's probably what's going to happen.
I have to agree. Your first firefight is always an adrenaline fest. Happened to me, and we had to actually fix bayonets, and my hands were shaking so much I couldn't fix my bayonet properly. It was just clacking so much just because of just sheer adrenaline. So I had smoked hash earlier in the day, but I hadn't smoked it at that time because I was able to get hash in Saudi Arabia. But yeah, that pure adrenaline would just override everything, I would think.
I wonder who's actively saying to themselves around a table, hey, you know what would be a good idea? We should bring some hash to Saudi Arabia. We could just get a bunch and just smuggle it. Like who? That seems real like out there.
No, it's probably one of the princes.
It's part of the culture, man. It's
part of the culture.
If you're going to do it, the best thing to do is to get a Nigerian mule. They'll never suspect that.
Oh my God.
It was probably one of the Saudi princes, man. The Saudi princes have been nailed a few times with huge amounts of money or drugs.
Yeah, but they don't have a problem. They don't get in trouble, do they?
Well, they just chopped one of their heads off recently.
Remember what they did to the princess, the big wacko.
You know, hashish, and you know, it's allowed in their culture, you know, and as well as tobacco. So they can have large shishas that are. Every Saudi tent that I saw had a shisha that could sit 7 men usually. So
yeah, that's true. But you have to understand one thing about the Saudis. They selectively enforce law like we do here in this country. A whole bunch of them might be smoking hashish, and one Western guy would be smoking it, and the Saudi police would be on him like stink on poo-poo. And then you...
Oh, dude, it took a lot of coercing, and the only way we're able to do it is because the Saudis wanted American currency. And so by having American $100 bills, they wanted American $100 bills. So I worked 2 days of KP duty. And the first day I tried, and every time they put their hands over their ears saying, nope, can't do anything, can't do anything. So I traded some bills with them, and then I got KP duty the next day, and I showed up with a bigger stack of hundreds and was like, if you want, I got to have hashish. You know, it went out in the end.
Yeah, that was more dangerous than a firefight, you doing that in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, no shit.
Firefight would be an easy thing
They
to
approached me. They approached us. You got to understand, we worked with Saudi contractors for our food, so we worked with them. We just set the food out, and we just spooned it. They basically did everything else. So we just stood around, but they would approach us and say, "Oh, do you have money, US dollars?" And then we would hear, "Hey, they've got this underground market for American money." And so I was like, I want hash. So
still scary.
Yeah, but I was going to the front line. Come on, fuck
yeah. I think about the context.
I was gonna die anyway. I was prepared for my own death.
Yeah, I you know what's funny? I got shit for smoking weed all the way through prison, and I had to ask my friend who gave me shit. I said, you know, you smoke it out there where there's no real pressure of being in prison or being in war in this case, and you justify smoking pot. I've never needed a joint more in my fucking life than sitting in prison surrounded by these idiots. So leave me alone, you know?
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is we sat on the front longer than my hashish that I had, so you know, you only had so much, and there was no going back from the front saying, "Hey, can I get a refill on this?"
Damn.
Yeah, in Vietnam, you get 10-year-old little kids walking up to you during a firefight, going, "Hey, you want to buy?" You know, and show you a bag of Thai bud or Thai stick, and you think, "Are you crazy, kid? There's a firefight going on here." And they duck down a little bit and go, "Okay, then you hurry by and I go." So that was kind of the mentality there. I had a pregnant Vietnamese woman. I was a combat field medic. I had a pregnant Vietnamese woman during Tet Offensive by the horse race track in Saigon waddled up to me behind a concrete barrier and rolled back on her back and opened her legs, and she was breaching. And so I delivered the baby while under fire. She gathered the baby up, wrapped it up in cloth, stuck it on a thing on her back, thanked me, pinched my cheek, and crawled away. All that happened in about 10 minutes while under intense fire. And afterwards, yeah, I smoked. And
yeah, I'd smoke a joint too.
You weren't supposed to, because it would give your location away to the enemy if they could smell what you were doing during a firefight. But at that point in time, I was like, I need a fucking joint.
You know, that's the same thing they say at Coachella. It gives your location away to the enemy when you smoke a joint.
Well, it's true. What can I say?
Good fun.
That's why I recommend those little Hello Neighbors or Smoke Buddies. Smoke Buddies have been the thing, man. Those are great. They eat their charcoal filters. They eat the smoke, whereas the Hello Neighbors will blow through a filter and actually covers up the scent of the smoke.
Mm.
I wish we'd have had vapor pens in Vietnam. The best we came up with was two hot knives, and squish the bud between them, and then try not to burn your face.
I'll go with wishing we had a less aggressive government and didn't send you there in the first place. But vapor pens could have been a good second.
Vietnam wasn't that bad of a place. I was up there in a place they called Dalat in the Central Highlands, and it was 78 degrees year round there, and you could drive down these rubber tree plantations and look off the side of the road, and they went off into infinity. There were so many rubber trees there, and it was just an amazing place to be, except for a couple of firefights that we ended up being in while we were there, and we got attacked by NVA, and turns out half of the NVA guys that were attacking us the day before were working on the base camp where we were. There was a huge concrete dome, and we closed the door, and they couldn't get in at us, and we called in a gunship, which came and went over the place a couple times, and everybody outside got killed, and we were able to leave. But a strange place. But if it wasn't for the killing going on, a wonderful spot.
Yeah, the killing could really put a damper on things, I'd imagine,
Yeah, walking outside and walking through 350 bodies to get in a helicopter and fly away. It's a powerful experience. Being inside the concrete dome when they flew over with the miniguns, and it sounded like somebody dropping marbles on an umbrella over you. And it was a very fearsome and scary sound. We weren't sure that it wasn't going to kill us as well, but it did. It just killed everybody outside.
Yeah, as Christopher Hawker says, all that killing really bums you out. Yeah, no shit. I would be in complete and total shock, probably curled up in a ball under the helicopter, shaking. Glad to have not been there. Feel terrible for those of you that went. And although I hate the idea of what it's all about, I do understand the guise of which they got most of you to go under that freedom and to fight for your country. And that's righteous and an amazing thing, but still just terrifying to go around to different countries and be in war That is some terrifying shit.
At the time in America, it was most people were drafted.
Right.
Yeah, I was an idiot and volunteered for that shit. So, you know.
Yeah, don't feel alone, T. And I was an RA. I signed up. But, you know, I grew up on Army bases. My dad was in the Army. He fought in World War II. He fought in Korea and a bunch of other places. So I was conditioned. And when he dumped me off on my 17th birthday in front of the recruiting station with a $20 bill, he said, now you're on your journey to be a man. Don't come back home. I can't take care of you anymore.
I graduated in '67. I think they drafted about a quarter of the graduating class of high school.
Jesus.
Yeah, and for those that know the origins of the Bay of Tonkin, I mean, man, that whole war was a scam. It wasn't.
It was all based on lies and a made-up event to create a war.
Exactly.
Hey, that sounds like my
aren't they all?
Right, my war as well. Mine turned out to be George Bush Sr.'s company slant drilling oil into Kuwait and got caught by Iraq, and then Iraq invaded Kuwait, and then they were like, oh, we have to go protect this democracy, which turned out to be a monarchy when I got there. So, yeah, it was full of lies and misinformation. It was all about oil. You know, I didn't defend my country, but I'm proud of my service, but I never defended my country. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
now I defended my country when I was back here fighting the government in my court.
That was a little small, clean war. The second war in Iraq is still going on, man.
Exactly.
You can pretend that was clean. I got to see it from the inside, and no war is clean, my friend.
It was obviously better than the second one. Think about it like that.
Oh, no doubt. I don't envy, the resistance that those guys dealt with, but, every war is each its own hell. And I don't envy any person or any human ever having to go through it. Yet those baptisms by fire have made us stronger and have also given us the opportunities to live past our everyday fears and take the challenges that we have, and have educated us in ways that have shown us compassion to drive us every single day. I wouldn't know every single one of you here if I hadn't have gone through my war. I would have no idea what I would have experienced otherwise. But those things brought me to where I am, and I'm thankful for them. However, as traumatic as they were, they strengthened me for my fight just recently that I won.
Well,
so,
what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but it'd be nicer if you didn't have to go through all the stress and hassles in the goddamn first place.
Yeah.
Yes, but we have to lead by examples, when those times do come. And I think many of us have shown that time and time again, in much respect to you all.
Well, wars are really about culling the population. So all the rest of it's bullshit. The certain number of controllers and people who have money want to keep the population at certain levels, and so they hold a war. It culls a lot of the young people out. And you can the anecdotal evidence is look and see how they treat veterans after the wars. I mean, these are the people who went there and put their asses on the line, or volunteered to even go, like myself. And you come back and you have a problem about it, or you can't sleep, or you're nervous around people afterwards, and you go to them about it, and they're like, PTSD? Well, we don't even have that listed as an illness. So what do you want? You want some Valiums? And that was in the when I came back in '68. The guy offered to put me on Valium.
Oh, they're still doing it.
And I said no then, and I walked away from it. And every time I've ever gone to the VA, which I have to go fairly often, at least once a month, that Nurse Ratchet comes up to you with a clipboard and two big bulging pockets of pills that they try to give to veterans. I forget what they're named. There's a bunch of different generic ones. Basically, they're happy pills. And they come up to you and they go, hi, hey, a lot of the vets from your era are taking this medication and they're really happy with it. And we wondered if you'd like to try it. And I always tell them, no, thanks. I'm not into happy pills because later you might stop making them. And then some people would be crazy enough to come down here with a machine gun and go, where are my fucking happy pills?
You need to, next time she says that, turn around and go, hi, You know, we're finding a lot of women in your category are really loving getting high on weed. Pull out a little nugget, maybe give her a bud or a joint.
Yeah, and then they physically remove you from the VA.
Yeah, you have to be kind in your answers back to them. You have to be really clever, and you can insinuate, but you've got to really be careful how you insinuate.
I bet.
Because if you say something that can be held against you, like E10 said, you know, you could get marked forever there. And you don't want,
right,
you
don't
don't
mark
want,
your permanent record forever. And you know, when I discussed it, and I've made that mistake because I thought I was being forthright, trying to get my doctor to annotate it, and all it did was just isolate me further and get me removed from the VA. So fortunately, we're seeing that change happening in the VA system. That however, we still see the Republicans in our Congress still pulling those provisions out that finally come to protect us or allow doctors to actually write recommendations. So that's one reason why I also supported Prop 64, is because my brothers and sisters in arms can get their cannabis without having to deal with the VA any further as well.
the last 7 appropriation bills at the VA, which included making it okay for VA doctors to discuss marijuana with their patients, have been squashed by a certain group of GOP senators, 7 of them, and they've squashed it every single time. And these are the very same guys who vote for war all the time, and the very same guys who turn down all appropriation requests for veterans and for the VA. It's what makes it so tough for the VA to help vets and not have these long wait periods and times, because these guys who are holding the purse strings are all in the pocket of Big Farm and other huge companies. What they don't want to do is they don't want to give the vets something that they can't take away. And usually when they give us something, it's very difficult for them to take it away again. So these same 7 guys, man, it's a cabal of fools on a fool's mission. And I want to see them gone, because the vets really, truly, and honestly, who survived it and came back, man, we owe them a pat on the back. We owe them something. You know, these guys put it all on the line, and they made it back. So we have to do something for them. I mean, in Rome, way back a long, long time ago, if you survived one battle, you got 600 pieces of gold every year, 600 acres of land, and a couple of donkeys to work it, and you were tax-free forever. We can't even get anything as vets after we come back and survive it. Even if you're partially disabled, and let's face it, there's all kinds of wounds on a human being. But the wounds that come into the eye and the heart, where you see things done, like a lot of people die so that you could live, it really digs a deep hole in your soul.
So who are these senators?
I'll get a list for you and post it.
I know for sure 1 or 2 of them lost the other day, so that's a positive.
All right. Well, that's a good step in the right direction, right?
Right. So what's happening with Pennsylvania there?
You mean the law, the medical cannabis law here,
Yes.
or just the political scene in general, or
What's happening with your medical situation there? It's kind of been in suspended animation there.
Well, no, the temporary regs are out, and I think that the application will be out, or at least the reg that describes the application in detail on what's going to be required will be out sometime early next year, and 60 days after that, they'll be due. So they're talking about trying to get this implemented by, stay tuned, I guess. Not too much to report on, other than a lot of people are interested in getting licenses.
Those Pennsylvania regs are like just insane. It's like the document's hundreds of pages long, is it not?
Well, I've only seen the thing that the Department of Health's released now. It's only like 30 or 40 pages. It's not that bad. But, I mean, there's just not a lot of specificity or detail. I mean, you could just assume it's going to require the same type of information in the other states. You're going to need to show a business plan, which includes your cultivation plan, your processing plan. Everything has to be processed in Pennsylvania. There's no flour, so it's all either got to be made into oil or concentrate of some sort. You have to discuss your security plan and how you're going to hire and your human resources practices, everything that you need to make a sustainable functioning business. And I think a big key element is also reaching out to the community and making sure that, the community has an expectation that this is going to be a business that's going to be in our area and it's going to bring economic viability, and it's not a bad thing to have in your town if one of these facilities is in your town. So yeah, really good program, hopefully.
Well, access is a good thing.
Yeah, I guess the thing that really sucks is that that's one of the things that's gone on in New York, is that, New York is an incredibly large state. They only limited it to 5 licenses, but I think they're going to throw out 5 more licenses. But the difficulty is to really get the doctors to really be able to prescribe this as medicine. And part of it is, winning them over. They have to take a course. And some patients they have horror stories of having to drive 4, 5, 6 hours just to see their doctor. Don't know if the doctor is going to be okay with prescribing them cannabis for their condition.
Out of curiosity, does anybody know when either Maine, Massachusetts, or Nevada's legalization kicks in, or when it's supposed to? Whereas I know California's parts of it immediately went into effect on the midnight of the election night.
My boys in Maine just said it's just happening. I mean, it's around. It's always been around. It's like one of the things, like in Northern California, a lot of cultivation there for years, and it's kind of like endemic in the community itself. Now you can just kind of come out in the open with it. So normally, where you've had to go down a dark alley, say, to go smoke a joint, now you can just smoke a joint there and not feel that you're going to get hauled away. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, Maine's always been active. I remember the Maine Vocals back in the early 90s, and which were the activists up there. And when I went to Portland and received a lot of love, and yeah, I'm very, very happy to see that with Maine.
Well, and Massachusetts is big. As you know, Massachusetts is a center of all kinds of intellect and hospitals. Harvard, MIT, Brandeis University are all in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is that's a real big step in the right direction. And to throw out to our boy out in Western Mass, and the Chem Dog, right? Isn't that where that legendary strain came from? So I mean, Massachusetts is a big state to go legal. That's great. Big victory.
Right, and they're mentioning that happens December 15th. I guess those regs go into effect in Mass, yeah?
Yeah, a lot of them are just sort of coming out, Mark. But the real cool thing, like with Pennsylvania, is they actually are taking a lot of information in. So for several months, there's been a questionnaire on site where they want to know, what should this regulation look like? I mean, what didn't work in other states? What worked in states? So they're actually getting a whole lot of input. So, our eyes will be on the final version of the regs to see what they're like. But we're hearing that they have looked at things like THC limits, which we know is just such a stupid idea, especially if you're into oil. It just doesn't make sense. By definition, you're adulterating it if you have a limit on the THC. So it just doesn't make sense.
Canada's the same way. They have that.
You should be able to fight that. You should be able to fight that by saying, hey, if we have to adulterate it, the various things that are available to adulterate it with are not approved for human vaporization into their lungs.
Yeah, but the reason they do it is so that you can have an oral route of administration.
Right.
They believe that if you're inhaling it, you're getting high. So,
yes.
In order to ruin everybody's fun, they're going to make you put it in olive oil.
Well,
but they want to approve vape pens. They want to approve vaporizers, personal vaporizers. And to show you how ridiculous the reg was for a while, they actually had nebulizers in there, which you can use for like administration of beta blockers for asthmatics and whatnot. But it's a water stream, and you imagine trying to do that with cannabis. Well, first of all, steam doesn't heat cannabis high enough to decarboxylate it is one thing, but the other thing is that steam is just a horrible vehicle for cannabis. So yeah, they got rid of nebulizers, but vaporizers, they like that, and they see that as the way of the future to personally administer cannabis.
Mark, nebulizers work, but you have to use vaporization by ultrasonics.
Right, but it's a mess, isn't it, Sam?
Well, you have to get the particle size very, very small, or it makes you cough really bad.
Yeah, the other thing is that cannabinoids are inherently sticky, nasty molecules to work with. I mean, any device that you're going to build is going to have some pretty special properties to be able to withstand the vigors of cannabinoids.
Yeah, because it's just going to get dirty and sticky. You're going to have residue everywhere. It's just going to be a fucking mess. God, I just think about it. Ugh.
Yeah, it's like the nail, or
Right.
anything that we use. If they're not clean, they don't work properly. You don't get nice, tasty hits off dirty equipment. Right. So it's the same with medicine. It doesn't work the same. It doesn't work right if it's not
Clean.
bowl.
Cleanliness is next to stoneliness.
Yes, indeed. That was one of the first things you said to me when I met you many, many years ago. Although what you actually said was cleanliness is next to godliness.
It's nearly the same, except for just some different letters, huh?
Just change it to dog. Change God to dog, and we're good.
To dogliness.
Dogliness. There we go. We got it.
Sam's more of a feline guy.
He likes his pussies.
He likes the kitty cats. He's got the kitty cat.
Remember, there's ladies in the room.
Well, I was actually talking about kitty cats 100% without any puns whatsoever.
Absolutely.
I will be honest.
None intended.
I haven't had a dog for 30 years. I've had a few dogs I really like, but you're right. As in an apartment, a cat works better.
Yeah, for sure.
Cats bark less, that's for sure.
I'll tell you, I heard mine at about 3 a.m. trying to get into our room and meowing for what seemed to be like forever. I was just like, you're not going to stop. Like, you just won't stop and go away eventually.
My cat over here is completely mute. She doesn't know how to meow. She just
oh my gosh,
silent forever.
Look at that. Just like that. We start talking about cats, and now there's a cat on Hash Church. Cat got
Been trying to get on camera for a while here.
Nice. Well, just like that, you had to wait for the feline conversation to erupt, which it did. And
hey, Judy, does your cat respond to catmint?
No, she doesn't. No, not at all.
Not at all. A non-responder to catmint. So you've tried like the toys, or you tried the fresh herb with her?
Yeah, she doesn't care. She doesn't care at all.
Oh wow,
Weird.
that's interesting.
How old is she?
5.5.
Oh, that's old enough. Weird.
Yeah. She's a weird cat. All cats are weird.
So you know that there's a monoterpenoid that's responsible for that reaction in cats, right?
Mm-hmm. It's closely related. It's closely related to mint, right?
Yeah, it smells like mint.
I don't know what the terpene is. It's not one that's in mint, but the catnip is like mint.
It's called nipedolactone. It's a bicyclic monoterpenoid ester, I guess you'd call it.
Interesting. Have they worked out the biosynthesis of it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. Nipedolactone. Check it out. Yeah, you can find it. Look at the work of John Pickett from Rothamsted. There's been a lot of work, really elegant work on the bios, but it's an iridoid monoterpenoid, and the iridoids are in a number of different plants. They're glycosylated, and when they're glycosylated, they serve as, I think, a plant hormone regulator or something like that. But they also have very, very interesting properties, as Chimera was saying before, semiochemical properties. And so very similar to nipedolactones are dihydronipedolactones, which is the hydrogenated version of nipedolactone. And that's actually found in the anal secretion of various beetles. So, beetles don't talk, but they communicate through a chemical ecology system of basically emitting chemicals and pheromones that tell the beetles behind it where they should go or what they should do. Or so again, maybe one of the evolutionary pressures on cannabis that evolved certain biosynthetic pathways to make terpenoids was based on the fact that, again, there is interactions and there is a chemical ecology way of communicating between bugs that could have created an evolutionary pressure that existed between in the plant kingdom.
Yeah.
And I thought the
Although a
Beatles
lot of
just made
examples of
albums.
Sorry. A lot of examples of that are about pollinator attraction, right? And that obviously doesn't apply to cannabis.
Yeah, so it turns out the insect nipedolactone, catmint itself, is a pretty good insect repellent, but it's a lacewing attractant. So it attracts lacewings, but it repels most insects. So why would it just attract this one and repel a bunch of others?
I don't know. Like osamine is like that
Very,
too.
very
Osamine
curious.
has been found to repel whiteflies in tomato, and we all know that cannabis can be susceptible to whiteflies too.
Yeah, so there's about maybe 1 or 2% osamine in the essential oil of catmint.
Cool.
It's one of the minor terps. There's carvone. We see carvone. We see carvacol, which is again a derivative of carvone.
Right, and those
carvone is the caraway.
Those are all precursors to menthol.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of like a mint, but it's kind of not like a mint. So it doesn't have the camphor. It doesn't have the eugenol. It doesn't have the typical, minty mentha type compounds. So you don't see menthone, you don't see menthol, but you see beta caryophyllene is in there, but nipedolactone is primarily the some essential oils have up to 60 or 70%.
That's interesting too if it's an iridoid, because iridoids are made by a completely different biochemical mechanism than traditional monoterpenes. So that.
Yes, yeah. So but Mother Nature is very creative in how I was going to say this before, we were talking about conservation of terpene synthases. These things often moonlight and do several other different things, even genes will moonlight too, because certain genes which code for certain enzymes, there's all different kinds of functions that when you knock those genes out, you can see a variety of different effects that you didn't necessarily correlate to that particular knockout. But I know that a lot of enzymes carry out a lot of ubiquitous chemistry that you never really know until you really start looking at how you would take those enzymes out. So yeah, a lot of moonlighting going on.
Yeah, interconnected systems and everything.
You bet.
Well, I can tell you that the catnip oil definitely has powerful mint overtones to it when you smell it. I got some right in my hand here right now. And
yeah, after we realized that our cat doesn't really respond to it, we just started using it in cooking, actually.
Catnip?
Yeah.
What do you cook with it?
I use it sort of like a oregano or thyme.
Huh. That's interesting because it does have historical uses for treating GI disorders.
Really?
Catnip tea, yeah. Some people find it very distasteful, though. It's got a very loud, herbaceous kind of front note to it, doesn't it? It doesn't taste like the regular spearmint, peppermint, varieties, but certainly the catmint varieties, at least that I'm familiar with, I don't find very.
Yeah, no, it's not great.
No, it's not the most pleasant tasting material, but I think
neither is oregano if you eat too much of it. Oregano oil can be very overpowering, but in small amounts, it's nice.
Right. What are the terpenes in oregano?
I don't know. Good question.
Okay.
I know you can use oregano medicinally in many different ways. It's a very potent detoxifier. The catnip stuff smells at first like it's got a lot of mint in it, and then there's a lot of secondary flavors.
Well, we got to do some kitty dabs, John. Some kitty dabs. Get some cats on the nail, and we'll dab out the cats.
There's already an Instagram account called Cats Who Dab. I'm not making this shit up. I think you can't.
I just want to bring up the active compound in oregano. So it's called Carvacol.
Carvacol,
yeah, and it's a very potent antimicrobial. So it's great. That's why a lot of people take they take oil of oregano, drops of it, and swallow it when you get a sore throat coming on. It's a very potent antimicrobial. I think it's actually in Buckley's. I think Carvacol definitely is part of that cough medication.
Is that what pregnant women are supposed to avoid in oregano oil extracts? Because I know they're so potent that when you're pregnant, you should avoid that particular extract.
Most essential oils, you need to be very careful when you're pregnant. I'm not super familiar with all the essential oils and how, like, in regards to pregnancy, but anytime, like, all the stuff, the knowledge I have, whenever someone who's pregnant or breastfeeding, your recommendations for essential oils and plant compounds, you have to be very careful because a lot of these compounds are too strong. And I think, like, even certain essential oils that can be used for babies, even during cold and flu season. So like eucalyptus and like peppermint, even those types of aromas you have to be careful with because these are very, very concentrated compounds and they need to be properly diluted. But I haven't heard of oregano with pregnancy, but it wouldn't surprise me if there were concerns.
It says it stimulates the uterus and can cause a miscarriage. I just remember for all 3 of our children, the midwives every single time said stay away from oregano oil extracts.
That's interesting.
There's actually, I know that.
There's Carvacol in Catman oil too. That's really interesting that you mentioned that. I think there's maybe like 1 or 2% in Catman oil of the Carvacol. So that's really interesting.
That's a highly modified terpene too. It's not a simple terpene.
No. Yeah, water has been added, right?
Yeah, and it's been cyclized. It's a phenol.
Right.
And is it not phenols and terpenes that produce all of these terpenes that we are loving? Do you have any like information on that, Judy, of like the sort of biosynthesis of terpenes in these plants? And do they all happen in glandular trichomes, or some of these terpenes being created elsewhere in plants, like in the fibers or the stalks of certain plants?
Most of the interesting ones, like the ones that sort of taste and smell good, are being produced in the trichomes, just like the cannabinoids are. There's some other ones, larger sort of terpenes that are in roots, but I don't know very much about that, and those wouldn't taste like very much,
For sure.
But cannabis roots are supposed to have some interesting medical properties too. I don't know very much about that, but I've heard.
I'm actually putting together a paper right now with Ethan Russo. We're writing a paper on cannabis roots, and you were right. There's lots of active, interesting compounds. I don't necessarily want to talk about it just yet, but in another episode, I'll go into more details. But what's interesting about the roots is there is no cannabinoids, so it is some of these other terpenoid compounds. So there's cannabis sativine is one of the compounds, and we don't know anything about this. So pharmacological studies on it. And what's the other one? Oh, sorry, fritoline is one of the major compounds found in the root. Do you know very much about fritoline? So it's found in other plants. It has anti-inflammatory effects, but that's one of the compounds found in the cannabis root that has some activity for inflammation anyway. So, but no cannabinoids in the roots.
Yeah, I've also heard about cannaflavins in the leaves, which are sort of related to cannabinoids, but produced differently and probably not psychoactive.
Interesting.
Well, I remember in the 60s, people would dig up a whole plant, dig up the entire root ball while the plant was still alive, and plunge it in boiling water before they turned it upside down, trying to hurry along something that was in the root system to push out of the top of the plant. It was a wives' tale scenario that they were doing it. I was always just interested to see that people are always trying different ways to try to make the plant a little more potent or get a little more out of it. Or maybe they were thinking about driving the resin up the stalk by putting the roots in boiling water. I'm not sure what all the thinking was behind it. But
during the processing, that was a part of the step, is they would do before they took the roots off, or were they collecting the water from the root extract? Because there's a history of using the cannabis roots in water extractions, and like a lot of data, not scientific data necessarily, but like anecdotal through all the medicine papers and such. What? and like Galen, and they're taking the cannabis root water extracts and finding it has amazing anti-inflammatory effects, and especially for gout. Gout is like, it's so repeated and talked about that that's become really interesting to me about how cannabis roots could potentially be a treatment for gout. And it seems to be in a water bath is traditional how they're using it, or even taking the root mush and like mashing it up and then putting that on top of like areas that were inflamed. And also another thing that has a long history of reported use for cannabis roots is hard tumors. So not necessarily cancerous tumors, but hardened spots on the body. So they always talk about these hardened tumors and gout and inflammation, and how the cannabis root, specifically the cannabis root, is very effective for these things. And I can imagine if they combined all aspects of the plant, it would even be more powerful. But definitely more research needs to be done and going on.
Yeah, there's more stuff in the plant that we don't know or haven't totally come to understanding with yet. The way the plant grows and produces the seeds, and all the birds are repelled from trying to eat on the plant until the seed is mature and falls off. Then the birds get a chance to grab the seed, but the seed is too tough of an outer shell for a bird's digestive system to handle it. So the bird flies somewhere, takes a poop, there's the seed, it's got a blanket of moisture on top of it, maybe it rains too, and the plant continues on. And that's the natural way that the plants have established in propagating themselves. And until that seed is ready, the terpenes that are emitted off of the plant keep bugs and birds and would-be eaters of the seed away. And so these are the very terpenes that we enjoy so much, but they're also bug and bird repellent. And it's just interesting how the plant manages to produce these to keep its seed safe.
And cat attractant, a bug repellent, but a cat attractant. So what the fuck evolutionary pressure is that that's going to put a cat or a cat excitant, kind of like the way cannabinoids are to humans, these compounds are to cats. That's just, it's Mother Nature's amazing, right? I mean, in her time course of evolution, she's evolved these plants that have multiple functionality. That's just very, amazing to think about how it's all related.
Well, the deal is it's all related. You just gave the explanation and the answer to that philosophical question. It is all related, and it's so interrelated, and it's such a miracle to realize that every single thing in nature has its own way of surviving and dealing with it. The way this whole place is propagated all the time. And I think we all do it together because underneath it all, we're all of one mind. We're here to experience and understand life and love.
I'll puff to that.
Me too.
I will absolutely puff to that, Sir Indra. We got people
Judy,
chatting it up.
can you tell us more about how you analyze the terpenes? Some of the basic techniques. I don't know. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So we use gas chromatography, which is sort of the art of separating out compounds from each other. And terpenes that can smell so different or have such different effects are chemically very similar to each other, right? They're all sort of very light oils. So we use chromatography to separate them out. And then we use in my lab, we use mass spectrometry to identify them. So by looking at how the molecule sort of breaks apart into its constituent pieces, and also how long it takes it to get from point A to point B under certain chemical conditions, you can do a pretty good job of identifying what the compound is, or if it's a more rare one, at least you can make a good guess.
You get the molecular weight. You get the molecular weight of your compound.
Molecular weight and its hydrophobicity and its volatility and the molecular weight of the parent compound, as well as the way it fragments into little bits.
Judy, do you end up with a little bottle of the terpenes, or do you just have the evidence that the terpenes were there from analysis?
Yeah, just the evidence. Unfortunately, we don't have a way to collect them at the end of it afterwards because
they're
sort
destroyed. Yeah, they're destroyed
exactly.
in the process.
It would
Do
be.
you use NMR at all?
No, I mean some people in my lab do, but I personally have never used NMR.
So why MS as opposed to GCFID?
So the easy answer is that MS is what I currently have access to.
Okay.
Our mass spectrometry lab is equipped with several mass spectra, but I also think it's better in a lot of ways. Like
It's more sensitive, much more sensitive,
much more sensitive.
and you get the molecular weight.
You get the molecular weight and the fragmentation pattern. So if retention time isn't enough, or sort of the first step is their retention time, the retention time of these compounds, which tells you certain physical properties, like how volatile they are and how hydrophobic they are. But some of them are very similar that way. Or you can have two compounds that come out at the exact same time, and with an FID, you won't necessarily know that.
Or you could be doing chemistry in your injection port at 200 degrees where you're making your injection, correct?
Yeah, you can get rearrangements at high temperature or rearrangements along the column, or you can have things that sort of stick in the injection port. Like cannabinoids will definitely stick in your injection port. So mass spectrum just gives you more information than an FID will. But FIDs are better for quantitation unless you have really high quality analytical standards.
I think FID is overrated. I have mass spec on the end of my GC.
Yeah, it's just there doesn't seem to be any advantage of FID over GC.
Yeah, you could have multiple channels on the end of your GC. You could have just a channel that you switch from FID right over to your mass spectrometer.
Why are all the labs using FID then?
It's cheaper.
And it is good for quantitation too.
Yeah, you can't use mass spec for quantitation unless you have really good standards. And for some of the more rare terpenes, it's hard to get standards. They're very expensive, or both.
Well, in some of the rare terpenes, you can't even identify. I mean, if you look at Justin Fischetik's work, there's a whole bunch of terpenes that they had the MS data for, but they couldn't identify.
Especially the sesquiterpenes. Sesquiterpenes are very difficult to identify.
Right.
Yeah, that's why you need NMR, because if you supplement that data in the GC mass spec with the NMR data, you'll be able to figure it out.
Do you have a way to purify sesquiterpenes in high enough purity and high enough volume from cannabis to get NMR?
Well, Mark's whole thought is that you can do the complex mixture, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could use NMR down to what, maybe about, I want to say like 0.5 maybe mole percent. I mean, there you can look at all kinds of different small little peaks in the baseline, and then you buy that authentic terpene and you spike the sample and you look to see if those are your peaks that go up, and then you could say, aha, that's beta caryophyllene or that's terpene. You're right.
It's not get around the need for a standard, right? If you don't have a standard.
Yeah, but here's another good thing you can do. What you can do is you can do a bicarbonate wash. Since most of the cannabinoids are acids, right? They'll extract out in a bicarbonate wash. So now what you're looking at after you do a base extraction is everything that doesn't extract over is going to be basically rich with your non-polar molecules like your terpenes. Nice. So when you take NMR, so again, yeah, it's I've likened it to looking at the Mona Lisa. If there's a painting of the Mona Lisa across the street, I can tell by looking across the street that there's a painting of the Mona Lisa, right? So right. THCA, which is the star of the show in cannabis, right? When I look at the NMR of most extracts, it looks just like THCA. It's a spec, you know. So if I eliminate the THCA, so if I undress the Mona Lisa, I can see everything else in the painting that's not THCA. And so, yeah, the trained eye could do this, but there's also multi-nuclear techniques and ways that you can correlate between carbon and proton NMR that really gives a unique advantage of using NMR to not only look at the structure, but actually look at the connectivity and see which signals are connected to what, because you can do NOE experiments and a variety of different experiments now in NMR. It's very, very sophisticated for looking at complex mixtures of compounds, and cannabis is a perfect candidate for it.
Very cool.
For an R&D tool, and again, I'll just go back to what we were saying earlier, I think mass spec in general, Ryan, is better for R&D, and maybe FID is better for just routine. FID, yeah, there's not a whole lot that can break down, but on a mass spectrometer, things do breakdown, but you get a lot more information about the molecular weight of what you're looking at, and different rearrangements and fragmentations. And so,
and especially for
maybe
something
that's
as
just-
complex as cannabis, being able to tell if you have two peaks that are co-eluting is really valuable.
Right, especially when you look at osamine and these other rearranged products. I mean, there's only very subtle differences between the compounds themselves, like the position of the double bonds. I was saying a lot of these things are constitutional, or what are called positional isomers. So it's the same atoms, it's the same molecular framework, but where the double bonds are different. And so it creates a broadness in being able to analyze for those, because those things, when you stare at them cross-eyed, can interconvert between one another.
Especially a lot of these sesquiterpene oxides will break down really, really easily at above room temperature.
Yep.
Yeah, but aren't those temperatures, they're subject to those temperatures in the injection chamber of the GC anyway, right?
You can do cold injection, which gets you around that, although it's less quantitative.
Yeah, the kind of testing that's going on in the industry right now is, basically to cycle through as many, samples as they possibly can get through.
Yeah,
and I don't know what the throughput versus when they actually break down their injection ports, clean them out, because like you said, cannabinoids and a lot of these compounds, when they oxidatively degrade, create sticky resinous materials that stick around. They don't just go away,
Yeah, we're going to call them pretty quickly.
They do actually. If you leave them on Sam's coffee table, they're gone. I don't even know where they go. I go to the bathroom, I come back, they're gone. They're like those cannabinoids, those sticky resins. They just disappear over there.
Well, actually, that's not completely true. The THC is gone, but the other cannabinoids, I'm not so interested in them.
This is true. Well, good conversation today. I like it. It's always interesting to get into things a little deeper. Nice to listen to Judy and Natasha and Mark get into the science. Chimera, Skunkman Sam, we love the plant. We're deep into this plant, can you tell? It's kind of funny because the conversation can go from this sort of academic standpoint of studying the science and how it's going to benefit mankind, from like, remember when we were all getting arrested and put in jail and like they were ruining our lives? It was like, or even, some of us even go back further than that. Like Todd, like, remember when I was a child and I had cancer? Holy shit, dude. Unbelievable, really, this whole journey that we've all had.
Remember when I was in Vietnam?
Or remember when I was in Vietnam and I was smoking a joint? Like, it's just an unbelievable companion plant.
And it's so amazing to hear all this stuff, right? Like, when we're talking about injection port temperatures and stuff, to get the perspective on why it matters. Why it's actually important and who we're doing all this research for.
Judy,
really
it's about time, right? It's about time we're having this conversation.
Totally.
We need to have this conversation.
Totally.
And people need to understand that there is a whole lot of science behind the testing of cannabis. I know that there's a real big knee-jerk reaction in the industry to hate the labs and to be pissed about the irreproducibility of these labs. But someday these labs will all be up to standard and up to par. And I'm advising all of my clients, without exception, to really make the investment or think about making the investment in in-house analytics. And along with that, hire a chemist, hire a Bachelor of Science chemist who knows how to fix the instrument and knows how to run the instrument and can basically produce
a guy named Mark.
Results.
Trying to get them to hire Mark, because this is starting to sound like one of the
Mark's moved well past the Bachelor of Science.
Yeah, no, I'm a PhD. No, I'm just saying that they should hire somebody young, right?
He's promoting the youth, the young, the new, the next batch.
Right. Our ACS subdivision that we have now in chemistry, cannabis chemistry, this is to promote everything that we need to do to make these testing labs better and to make them, Go ahead, Mark.
Here's one for you, Mark. Talking about chemistry, we had a question by Conscious Rosin, kind of more of a request than a question, but it's in regards to the topic of driving under the influence and of cannabis. And so I know there's going to be a whole thing where they already have figured out ways of testing for cannabis. That's a huge industry, those analytical labs that test piss for different things, for jobs and whatnot. But what do you guys think?
The saliva test.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of new ones made.
The issue with that, Marcus, to be quite honest, is that until the correlation between driver impairment and cannabis use is correlated in a statistically valid way on a wide swath of populations with people who have liver disease, people who are predisposed to anxiety.
That's not gonna happen.
Exactly what I was thinking. That's never going to happen.
Until that happens, all of this is just bullshit and just hype.
Yeah, but that's not. That's not a valid
developing the gadgets.
District. Like, for example, in Washington State, I don't know exactly what the number is, but there's a set limit in milligrams.
Yeah, and it's just based on the limit of detectability. Basically saying if you have cannabis in your system, your history. It's based on that 9 nanogram per liter.
Well, but that's what I'm saying. It changes from area to area. Like I was saying last week, in Italy and Czech Republic and Germany, they use these little dipsticks. They look like little rolling papers you stick in your mouth, and there's a color change of there's cannabinoids in your saliva.
Yeah,
so
but how is that correlated
like 5 hours
to driver impairment? How is that correlated?
I don't think it does. It just shows that they have a certain thing in their system, and that's sort of the question in the sense.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. In those areas, the law has decided that is sufficient to prove, cannabis use before driving. They don't care about intoxication.
Of course, piss test, because all that's testing for is an inactive metabolite, which is in your urine. So it shows no impairment at all.
Chimera, I'm glad you finished where the dipstick went, because when you first started telling that story, I was wondering.
What you started thinking about a patent. I know what you started thinking about.
he wrote that patent already. No, I think that it's interesting because I've had this discussion with people in the sense that, alcohol, there's somewhat of a disassociative nature with alcohol when you get drunk, that you don't want to admit that you're drunk, or you don't want to acknowledge that you're drunk, or you definitely don't want to acknowledge that you can't, operate a dangerous vehicle at high speeds. There's something about that where with alcohol, we know that's a real thing, and that's part of the problem why so many people end up dying in fatal alcohol-induced car accidents. Alcohol is constantly present at these things, and I think it's part of the reason is because alcohol convinces someone that they can do something that they can't. And I argue, at least for myself, because I haven't done the test nationwide or a huge swath, but that cannabis generally is like, there are those who can use it in high doses and just not be affected by, say, driving a vehicle. And then there are those that may feel that they don't want to drive a vehicle. I got too dabbed out or whatever. Yeah. And the joy of the plant is that it won't convince them that they can or should drive if they feel uncomfortable. They'll just say, I don't want to drive. I feel uncomfortable. And that's a pretty big thing to acknowledge.
Well, some people are, not everybody.
Some people.
You got to remember, these rules are made by society at large. It's not made by stoners that believe in it.
Of course not. Of course not.
Your average person that is not a cannabis user and maybe tried it once or twice in their life, they probably tried it at a party, and they probably tried it at a party when they were drunk. Right, because their inhibitions were low enough to actually try the cannabis, and everybody that uses both cannabis and alcohol knows that there's a huge synergy between the two, and so much of cannabis and so much alcohol, the overall result is much bigger, right? Like you really get impaired when you use the two of them together.
Yeah, I mean, if alcohol is being used in conjunction with it, it's sort of like all options are off the table, because obviously alcohol is going to affect.
But if that's the only time that you ever tried cannabis, you might think, wow, I smoked cannabis and I got really fucked up, right?
Well, this is what I'd say. If I dabbed out your average person that could absolutely drive a car without any problem, and I gave them a fairly large dab, I would argue that 9 out of 10 of them, if not 10 out of 10 of them, would say, there's no way I'm getting behind my car, the wheel of my car right now. Exactly, but I'm saying they won't convince themselves that I'm just fine to drive if they aren't. And that's generally seems to be, I mean, it's obviously the truth, because the bottom line is that people aren't dying from smoking cannabis and then driving cars, but they are from drinking alcohol and driving cars. And we know that is an absolute fact.
Well, but the big demon about the whole deal, Mark, is whenever people get busted for drunk driving, when they go to court, the very first thing they say is, "And I was stoned on marijuana." I mean, this crutch has been used in more cases than you can point a stick at. People will cop to using marijuana to try to get the charge lessened or to get into a diversion program when it's not true. Most of the accidents that they found that are fatal that had some marijuana in their bloodstream had massive amounts of alcohol in their bloodstream. So what was the pot doing when the alcohol was already 2 times the legal limit? But yet they cite the marijuana as being involved in the accident. So until we clean up the system and start using real, honest facts instead of the bullshit that they propagate all the time for the convenience of the state, the convenience of the court system, and so that they can prosecute you, they mince these words together in such a way so that there's no way to get away from it. If you were totally drunk and you had 1 milligram of marijuana in your system, like as not, they're going to make an issue out of it. And it's a problem in this country because we've elected officials who've made these rules and are forcing us to live under them. And it ain't right, as Red Fox used to say.
Common sense tells you that alcohol makes your foot heavier. Cannabis makes your foot lighter. I mean, everybody knows it.
Yeah, it's pretty standard. That's what I'm saying. It's, I mean, I know what John's saying as well, because it's very accurate for, say, like the Midwest. You know, there definitely are people with this hardcore mentality where they are promoting this manipulation of statistics to direct negative connotation towards cannabis and cannabis use. But the reality of it is, you know, even with my mother who's visiting right now and worked as a 911 operator in Winnipeg, Manitoba for 30 plus years, she's the first to admit that, yeah, alcohol is a giant, huge part of 911. Like 80 to 90% of all the calls that come in are alcohol related. And there's anyone that works at 911, whether they are pro or against cannabis, would know that reality. You know, that's just the reality that it is, that certain things cause problems, and that those things that do cause problems are certainly, although they may be manipulated later on in the courts and by the law enforcement, the people who are taking those calls 100% and unequivocally know what's what. So.
Yeah. We waste the most money on alcohol, the second most money on people who are on alcohol beating up their wives and children.
Dude, I'm telling you, it's definitely not a good vibe.
And somehow we don't enact something to be done about it. I mean, there's no way you should be beating up your wife and your kids. If you can't handle alcohol, maybe we need background checks. You can't buy a bottle of tequila, fool. Every time you drink it, you beat up your wife and kids.
It's definitely like a beyond important factor that should just never occur. It's right up there with murder and rape. It's like children and women, well, men for that reason matter. Anyone should not be beaten because you're having a bad day and had too many drinks. And it's often so socially accepted that when people are like, "Oh, I was drunk." "Oh, well, he was drunk." I mean, come on, like.
Can I bring up something? You
yeah,
know,
please.
I've known Dennis Crone for 22 years, and I got a lot of love and respect for him. And he was a really loud voice against legalization. And ironically, he has publicly stated that he uses cannabis to treat alcoholism. Yeah. And you know, fortunately, Dennis lives in Northern California, San Francisco, where it's just literally cannabis everywhere. But the people in the Midwest that you're talking about who don't have access would really do well to have access with all this corporate pot we all fear. Because you know what, they have corporate alcohol rammed down their throats, available everywhere they stumble. And we don't have cannabis. And really, I think the world would be a significantly better place, just like Dennis's life was a significantly better place once he had cannabis and not alcohol in his system. You know, so this is where I think it's the chemicals in cannabis, and I think that they should be available to everybody, really. The more we talk about it, the more I think about it. I hope someday it's literally in every store.
I hope one day they put the word essential in front of cannabinoids. Essential. Just like amino acids, essential. Thank you. That's all we need. Everything else, just clear the table.
Does anyone on the panel think that there could be a time when we understand the endocannabinoid system so well that cannabinoids are fortified into our food like vitamins and minerals, and they're actually listed on the label?
Yes, 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 yes.
They already are fortified into our food. They're just called essential fatty acids.
Right.
The body builds them out of amino acids. All the extra cannabinoids that we use are just extra. You can get enough cannabinoids to feed your endocannabinoid system through proper food.
I know that smoking should be mandatory in states like Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa.
Yeah, I mean, like Natasha said earlier, even beta-caryophyllene is the CV2 receptor agonist, right? So beta-caryophyllene is in tons of, like we said, tons of plants, but it's in, pepper, black pepper in really high amounts. So just if you understand what's in your food and you eat healthy, you can definitely get everything that your endocannabinoid system needs.
Well, then
or you can eat at Burger King and just consume weed.
Right. So you know what, you guys have mentioned a couple of times about adding olive oil, and when you look at fats and oils, cannabis oil is better than olive oil on any standard of measure. So why wouldn't we want to use hemp seed oil as the carrier for the cannabinoids?
Well, you can in a lot of ways use hemp seed oil, but it doesn't last as long as olive oil, and olive oil tolerates heat better than hemp seed oil does. Hemp seed oil needs to be cold pressed.
But when you say it doesn't last as long, it's only because it's richer. It goes rancid faster, and the reality is if we used it fresher, it would be healthier for us.
Excuse me.
That's one possibility, Todd. The other possibility is to have a press where you make it fresh, like a little peanut butter maker, right in your house.
In your own home.
And keep it in the fridge or freezer, and it stays fresh.
Excuse me. I'd question how much
cannabinoids you could get into the oil, really, at that temperature, but it would definitely need some experimentation.
Wait a minute. I make hemp seed oil. It's pure golden. There's zero chlorophyll in it. And I have taken that oil and immersed it with THC oil, and it mixes instantly and really well. You stir it up, and 5 minutes later, it's totally immersed in it. And maybe it's tougher when you've got the chlorophyll in the oil, but I don't like cold pressing because you're pressing a lot of other things out. And so I separate the hulls off first and then separate the isoprotein from the oil in high purity and no green.
You told me years ago, Indra, that cold pressing was a misnomer at best.
It is, because they're wrapping the press up so they can call it a cold press. But with the pressures they use to squeeze the seeds, the temperatures get right up there, and it gets up in hundreds of degrees. And so they have a very powerful refrigeration unit wrapped around it. And it's a misnomer. They say cold pressed, and they're talking about the press is cold. Doesn't have anything to do with the. See, there's a big difference in the taste and the longevity of oil that is squeezed out and has green and chlorophyll in it versus golden cannabis oil, which is what we make.
No, that's true, Indra, but how much of this oil have you sold?
Well, I haven't really gotten into making it until now. We're just now thinking about doing it because I sent some samples around to different people, and it appears that I could sell all that I could make at this point in time.
There's no way that you couldn't. I mean, I've only contacted one company about it, which was Manitoba Harvest, and because they're my old partners, I think they're more. The first time I told them about it, for sure, they were freaked out about it. I think they looked at it like something we were trying to take from them, whereas really, it's something that I would absolutely love to broker to a hemp seed oil company, because it's like overnight you could have literally the best product on the market. And the crazy thing about it is, I know how these companies are making their product. I know that one of the companies uses a crazy water extraction process that the machine is like multi-millions of dollars to clean the protein powder isolate through this water extraction process. And from what I've seen of Indra's, and I had them tested in 3 different labs, all of the material that he extracted for me, and it was just completely next level. It was, you know, nobody still to this day has it, what he can make. It's still not available commercially, which is...
The other thing that makes the big difference between the method, which sounds like your method may well be tops, is the variety you use, because each variety of cannabis seed, when you make an oil out of it, has a different taste.
True.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. By the way, Natasha, if you recall back, somebody said they were going to get a 5-gallon bucket of those seeds for you, and that I would extract it for you. That offer's still there. That somebody didn't come up with the bucket of seeds yet, but I'm still 100% willing to do that for you. And then you'll have the purest protein isolate on the planet, the purest, best. You might want to ask Sam about sourcing a seed that has the kind of flavor things that you're interested in having, because he's right. I've tasted them all the way from tasting like pecan oil to walnut oil to an olive oil sort of taste of first squeeze olive oil. So you might want to check with him, but I'll still do that for you. And then if you like it, as I said, we can crank it up to 2,500 kilos, which would give you 50%, 1,200 kilos of oil and protein isolate.
She needs to try one of the Canadian varieties. Or is this going to be done in Canada or in the United States?
Kansas, worse.
Okay, well then it's not so simple to send seeds to Kansas.
Well, from Colorado, it probably isn't too hard to put them in some containers and...
Yeah, you're right. So try to find a good variety there where the seeds are truly finished and mature, because that'll give them a nuttier flavor.
Just be very careful at that border.
You can send look, you can buy a 5-gallon bucket of seeds in the States.
That's what I did. I bought already hulled seeds, and I will tell you that the ones that were sold in the grocery store from Manitoba Harvest that I purchased and sent to Indra, when I had them tested in the lab, when oil goes bad and it produces that sort of turpentine flavor, that sort of that off paint smell,
like a varnish smell.
Yeah, like a varnish smell. So the oil had a fairly high concentration in that, and it had nothing to do with the extraction process. The extraction process merely unveiled that the oil itself was well into rancidity and still being sold on the shelves of the grocery store. So the great thing about the ability to defat protein powder isolate, if you want to lengthen shelf life, is the way he does that extraction and at the temperatures that he does it at. The oil and the protein powder isolate have insane shelf lives, like completely. I bet you they're 20 times longer than the closest competition, if not way longer.
And the shelves.
I left an open bottle in the window.
Yeah, you said that last week.
For 2 years.
Wow.
And it tested the same exact results 2 years later at the lab that it did when I set it up on that shelf.
And Marcus, when you you got that shelled cannabis seed that you used for pressing, did you eat any of them? How'd they taste to you?
The seeds I did not eat because I purchased them online at a grocery store in Kansas and then had them shipped to Indra.
You never tasted them.
No, I just got to taste the oil and the protein powder isolate that he produced.
Would have been nice if you could have tasted the shelled seeds.
Yes.
That would have given you a good idea.
Absolutely. Well, if any hemp companies are listening, get in touch with me. I'd absolutely love to move. For all the work I did in the hemp world back in the day in Manitoba and the starting of different companies that all of me and my partners did and how it grew, and now they've got their Manitoba Harvest, and I personally just wanted to really kind of broker it to them thinking it would be a great idea. But I'm telling you, this is a really substantial thing that anyone involved in the hemp industry, regardless of country for that matter, you will definitely want to look into it. In the least, look into it, because, man, I'll tell you, if I had the infrastructure to start the company tomorrow and get the extractor, I'd do it myself. But there's companies that are way 20 years further along down the line than anyone that would start today to do this. And imagine Indra could just come in and make any of these companies have the highest quality oil and protein powder isolate. Not to mention the extractor also could extract the cannabinoids, which I guarantee you, none of them have that option right now to be able to use the same machine that's defatting the oil. He can also extract all of the cannabinoids and terpenes from the plant matter as well. So I don't know, that's just nuts.
In addition to that, Mark, that later that year, a friend of mine came to me and wanted to know about the shells that come off the seeds after they're hulled. He brought me a huge bag of them, and I extracted them. And what he got was a very powerful mixture of tannins and other compounds that were there in very small amounts. But when I extracted a 100-pound load of them, all of the compounds were concentrated and showed up in very large amounts.
Interesting.
And there was so much good stuff in the shell. It's a whole nother avenue of approach towards it. The
whole other industry.
It is. The tannins alone, the guy said that there was endless use for them.
Wow. So maybe there isn't even another business. Just go around collecting and maybe even getting paid to take away the seed hulls from these companies that have to deal with them otherwise.
And Marcus, you can remember, I developed a new outdoor variety of large-seeded hemp.
Finola.
No, not finola. That is the highest yielding variety.
Right, the highest oil yielding. Okay.
No, I'm talking about a variety I developed called Tina that has 20 seeds to the gram. So it's 3 times the size of a normal seed. And it can be grown outdoors in Canada. And yeah, it would be interesting if somebody was really interested in that. I hate to see it just end up not being grown. It was tested for a couple of years in Ontario, and it performed really well outdoors in Canada. It matured well, the seed matured, and all that sort of stuff. But, yeah, I wish somebody out there was really, really interested.
Let's do it.
But this is, I'm not sure it would be suitable for protein. This is especially because the seed is enormous. It's really
is it bigger than your giant Chinese seeds that you have?
Oh, it's almost that big.
Wow.
That's one of the parents.
Okay, I see.
The other parent was finola to make it earlier.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, Sam has incredible seeds that are like these giant, well, they're not walnuts, but like from a cannabis seed perspective, they look pretty big, especially because whenever he shows them to you, he shows them to you with these, I don't know if they're like Nepali seeds, I think maybe.
Yeah, the other ones are from the Himalaya mountains. And the biggest Chinese ones I have are 12 to 1 gram. And I grew those here, and they produce 12 seeds to 1 gram.
Yeah, they're huge. They're the size of small peas.
Yeah, exactly. They're like peas. But what about those little tiny Himalayan ones?
Or
how many per gram?
Slightly over 800 seeds to 1 gram.
Wow, that's a serious variation between those two.
Though the farther you go up the hills in the Himalayas, the more you find plants that produce massive amounts of seeds for propagation because the conditions are tougher the higher you grow up. The farther down you go towards the jungle, you find these other
I was curious about those seeds, so when I collected them at, I think it was a little over 9,000 feet in the Himalayas near Pelgam in Kashmir, when I collected those, I grew them in Santa Cruz, California, and they produced seeds that were the exact same freaking size. I mean, they were so tiny. They almost were as tiny as poppy seeds.
Well, gee, it's not going to change in one generation.
Well, I wanted to see if it was environmental affecting the seed size because it was 9,000 feet up in the mountains. So I grew it at sea level, and bango, they were exactly the same.
Of course, and you'd have to live to be about 3.5, 4,000 years to figure out if the environment made the change to give it time to play it again. So you and I, Sam, are going to be like the pyramids.
Well,
and the Sphinx.
I'm half that old now, dude. What are you talking about?
I know. When we pass on, they'll be looking at us like the pyramid and the Sphinx, wondering what these different things were that we did and knew about. Because how would we even transfer everything we've done and known so far prior to death? It's going to be nearly impossible.
Well, I'm sure glad you both show up here every Sunday and share little fractions of it. I really, really do appreciate it. I'm not going to lie.
Hey, I got a question for everybody, and it's, is there a way that we can publicly see how police departments and the CHP and the Massachusetts State Police and other police departments have to now publicly address the change of laws? Will they be making public position statements available? It would be really interesting. If anybody knows them, please post them in Hash Church.
Well, I think it's probably still going to be illegal to smoke and drive everywhere.
Yeah. I remember, but in Jamaica, when that came up, was a funny situation because it's like, listen, trying to get a lot of people in Jamaica to stop smoking and driving, that will be a big one. That will be a really, really big, hard take. Now, I have no problem doing it here in North America, but like I said, I got busted at a roadblock with a trunk full of weed, and that left me a little bit mildly scarred. I don't feel comfortable putting myself in a position where I'm getting pulled over and asked why my vehicle smells like cannabis anymore. I don't mind if it smells like fresh or hash, but not so much smoked because just from my own experience,
I think you'd have better luck trying to make sure Catholic priests stayed away from little boys.
And yeah. Marcus, one thing you'll have to admit, neither one of us want intoxicated drivers driving on the same roads where our family ran. Of course not. That said, would you rather have them smoking a joint or drinking?
Well, I'm not sure if they're completely intoxicated after smoking a joint. I think that should really be studied and looked at and made, like Chimera mentioned.
What I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
It's obviously more dangerous when they're drinking and driving. And
then we haven't even mentioned opioids. Like, people are popping these pills left, right, and center, and they're zombied out. There's all sorts of different, downers that they take with different prescription antidepressants and antipsychotics, and the combinations and synergies that these particular drugs do, not even to mention with the additional, let's throw a bunch of alcohol in the petri dish. It's a little bit scary. I just think that cannabis is the least of our worries.
Well, can I also point out something?
Yes.
That technically, Marinol, the warning label, says that you should get used to the medication before operating heavy equipment. So it's technically legal to drive with THC in your system, because if you are using Marinol and you are living your life and going to work and driving to work, that's all completely legitimate.
The same notification is in Boeing 787s when you're going to fly one, and you take those pills, Make sure that you fly it a few times without too many passengers on it before flying regularly with these pills.
Poor cannabis is constantly being compared to alcohol, and it's an unfortunate rap for cannabis to constantly be next to alcohol, this just insanely dangerous substance that just kills hundreds of thousands. It's just killed millions of people, and cannabis is just this super benign substance that heals people and increases the quality of life and increases positive thought and positive intention and positive manifestation. It's strange that it's constantly like, well, what about, we can't just let people drive when they're euphoric and feeling good. I mean, that's
blasphemy.
That's blasphemous. And then, of course, the ultimate one, which is the we need to keep it out of the hands of the children, which is Justin Trudeau's most important thing. And I'm like saying this as a parent. Okay, as a parent, let's just go through the small list of things that kids have access to, which is like alcohol right off the bat. They still go fish outside of places where you can buy alcohol, and they steal it from their homes. And then, of course, pharmaceutical drugs, which they can also steal from their homes or get out from each other out on the street or in school. And then there's fentanyl and the worry of W18 and all of these super powerful, like 1 milligram can kill 3 people type of thing. And it just gets to be the point where it's like, and then there's pot. Like, it's like cannabis. Like, oh, you mean like they could be smoking joints out in the field and like being kids? Like, to me, it just seems to be like, out of all of those options, cannabis is literally the least of our worries. How could it even be on the list with the rest of those substances of things? They're kids. They need to have something. They're going to need, they're in high school. They're looking for things. They're looking to be a part of sports teams. They're looking to learn about art, and they're looking to learn about technology. But part of the thing they're also looking at is the practicing of altering their consciousness. And this is something that we learn at a very young age when we get given a sugary treat for the first time and become little crackheads unknowingly for sugar.
It's the politicians and the lessons they've learned in their upbringing that bring about these ridiculous laws. It's like the story where the guy fills his dog's bowl with razor blades, and the other guy says to him, hey, you can't give your dog razor blades. And the guy says, no, I think you're thinking of chocolate. You know, and we've been conditioned that way to dismiss common sense and rather adhere to the corporate BS line that comes down. And listen, the trickle-down theory is busy at work. Here's the problem with it. None of the stuff that's trickling down is anything you'd want to get on yourself.
Yeah, well, that's about as accurate as it could be stated right there. I'm just saying, don't be so worried about the kids. Don't be so worried about there are other things we probably should be focusing on, both about driving under the influence and our children, than their use of cannabis. That's my opinion anyway. I know I don't speak for everyone.
Hey, when my kids said they wanted to smoke, I sat down, rolled up a joint with them, and said, "Okay, here, let's see how you handle this one."
And what were they, like about 7, 8 years old?
No, they were 14. My son was 14, and his younger sister had smoked with my wife. And anyway, rolled up a joint, and at the end of it, I said to him, "Well, what do you think?" And he leaned forward on the table, grabbed the ball and the papers, and rolled a perfect spliff that I could have never done in my life. And we had a second one, and I realized, yeah, they have access to everything. They have access to your picture, your medicine. If you think you're hiding something from your kids,
I don't.
I have a hot flash. Anybody who thinks they're hiding something from their kids is fostering a dangerous double standard in the kid's mind. That's where the kids later say, "Well, I don't want to do as you say. I want to do as you do." And then most think their parents are full of shit because they tell them one thing and do another.
It starts at a young age too. Like, children are brilliant, and only after having my third one, 11 years after having our last two, did I really understand that as sort of being a little older and being able to watch him grow up. He's aware of everything. And sometimes the odd thing, like if you say open the sliding door, he might not know what the sliding door is, but overall the vibe, he's aware of everything. That's why people think it's cute sometimes when they might all laugh at a punchline and the baby laughs simultaneously, and they're like, oh, look, he's laughing with us. It's like, yeah, of course he's laughing with you. Like, he thought the joke was funny too. He likes that everyone's laughing. It's incredible to see the level of understanding that children have at a very, very young age. Like, I'm talking like 1 and 2 years old. And when you see a lot of parents who talk around their children as though their children aren't there listening and understanding what they're saying, I see it constantly. And I'm like, man.
When Annie was pregnant, every day for 4 hours, an hour here, an hour there, I would put headphones on her tummy and, number one, talk to them. Number two, play them records about philosophy, science, reading, understanding. I know I was sort of taken after the Superman thing there in the capsule, right? But it wasn't 9 months. It was a 9-month journey, and why not expose them to all this? They're just sitting in there twiddling their thumb and looking at bodily processes and learning about the control of themselves. So why not give them something to think about when they were in there? I used to talk to Johnny all the time, and I'd tell him, push back once for yes and twice for no. And we had long yes-no conversations. And I always told him I would put my hands in a funnel on her tummy and go, be a good boy, make yourself a good body, and I'll see you soon. And the first thing he did when he came out, and they handed him to me, and I held him up, and I looked at him, and he said, hi. And the doctor, the Jewish guy standing there, said, you know, it's not just like that kid said hi. The nurse who was staying there looked at him and said, you are truly an idiot. He did say hi. Everybody in the room heard him except you. And it's true. They're totally aware right then and there at birth. And the idea that we think that they are not is truly amazing to me. It's like you think you just plucked them out of the void just now, and they came with nothing. But they came with everything, and they came fully innocent. And innocent is destroyed as we grow up with culture, unfortunately.
It's interesting that you say that that they're there with everything, that they show up that aware, you know, because it's not until I started doing macro photography that I realized the same thing was true for the cannabis plants that I was photographing. And I was photographing seedlings. And when I was looking at these seedlings under my macro lens, I was noticing that even on the first set of leaves, not the round ones, the cotyledon, but the epicotyl, the first set of real true leaves, there were resin glands present on it immediately, like right from the start of the plant's life. And I really used to think that they showed up later in the maturity of the flowering plant, like once the female plant started flowering, or the male for that matter, because I have some glandular males. The glands were generally showing up later, but the more and more I got my macro camera out there, the more and more I realized that these glands are present literally from the moment that seedling cracks open and releases those leaves. Pretty neat.
I saw little white hairs on the first set of leaves on plants seed in India, on the top of the roof in Bangalore, right at the equator. They produced 2 leaves and 3 white hairs, the first thing right off the bat. And they just continued becoming a bud all the way till they were 2 feet tall. And they never for once bifurcated or started doing anything else except making a bud. So being on the equator was a very, very good thing for them.
Hmm. Well, we've rocked out for 3 hours and 11 minutes so far on this Sunday afternoon hash church. Hopefully going to get out there with my family today. I have my mother visiting, which is a very nice treat. We only get her once every year or 2. I think it's been 2 years since the last time she came out here from Manitoba. So I'm definitely looking forward to spending some time with her and my family later today. Hope you guys... Go ahead, Tom.
I am going to bail. I'm going to go play. It's beautiful out.
Nice. Well, you live in California. You could say that pretty much every day, I'm sure.
That's why I migrated to California.
Yeah, so you could say, it's beautiful out. I'm going to go outside. It's beautiful out.
Yeah, huge fan of not having to deal with winter.
Nice. Well, get those plants out on your deck.
I know. Let's grow legal weed. It's just, I know, going to shift gears. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was a lot of fun talking.
Yeah, California. What 6 plants are you going to grow? What flavors? You got choices now.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I want a field, so I'm not sure how compatible I am with the law already.
I want a field. Hey, you know what, Todd? Just plant a field, and if they come there, just be like, listen, this is a co-op here. We have many, many people. 6 plants are in this 6,000 plants. I'm sure they'll be fine with it.
I think we can plant an unlimited amount of hemp, so we could just fill the front yard with like hemp, just for the fun of it.
Yeah, don't do that.
I'm just gonna
don't do that.
I'm gonna throw 6 20-pounders.
Yeah, you are. 6 20-pounders to everyone in California. Look, there's like 40 million people in California, and if they're all growing 6 plants, that's an enormous amount of cannabis. My goodness.
It'll all get burnt in the end.
Yep, it usually does. It usually does. Well, I do want to thank everyone for coming out to Hash Church. Thanks to Judy for sharing her time with us, and hopefully we'll be able to get her back and have a nice conversation about terpenes and the different work that she's doing. Dr. Natasha, always a pleasure to have you in as well. Dr. Mark Scaldone, always a pleasure. And of course, Indra and Skunkman Sam with the wicked stories and the wonderful vibrations. Chimera, Etienne, Johnny B, D420K, who didn't actually make it in, but I saw him in the chat, and Todd McCormick, as always. Thank you guys so much, the viewers, for watching us. We do so appreciate it, and enjoy your Sunday afternoon, and make sure you feed your endocannabinoid system and spend time with loved ones. Thanks, everybody. Peace out.
Mark.
Bye, everybody.